Joan Esposito. Live, local, and progressive. Filling in today for Joan, radio personality and author, Turi Ryder.
It's kind of fun to be in for Joan. In fact, it's a lot of fun to be in for Joan. I am, in fact, Turi Ryder, and across from me, Lady B at the controls. Coming up for you, so many first of the year kind of things in the offing. I know that. Oh well, I will get control. I will gain control of my microphone here so that you don't have to hear me coughing. I know that at the first of the year, a lot of people are taking stock. And since this is our first show of the year, yesterday having been sort of recuperation day, we have some stuff planned that may help you do some stock taking. Yesterday you got to hear some of the year in review, so that was lovely also. But as you plan your year ahead, there may be some important decisions that you have to make. There may be some reimagining of your place in the world that you get to do. There may be some hard decisions. So we're going to tackle some of that and some fun. Like if you've been wondering, who can I get to eat a Christmas tree? I'm sure you've never wondered that. You've never wondered, who can eat this Christmas tree? I may have that information for you. All of these things. And most of it very encouraging, I think. I do want to talk a little bit about this New Orleans disaster. I think we can reasonably call it a disaster. And our is it okay to call the president-elect a nut bucket? I'm not sure that but I would. Okay, quick off the draw. Our soon-to-be president, he reads the name, presumably, of the assailant. The guy who ran the pickup truck into the crowd of people, killing, I think the total so far is 15, and then dies in a shootout with police, and has a name that is ethnic Muslim. And the president gets out there and talks about this is the problem with the immigration system. And I'm thinking, can you not, does nobody have the capacity to get in front of the president-elect and say, could you just check and make sure? Could you just check and make sure that you really actually, for once in your life, know what you're talking about? Because as we all know now, and as the president-elect could easily have known if he had just bothered to maybe, I don't know, read a reputable news source instead of one owned by a Chinese cult. You know which one I'm talking about, right? If he had just actually bothered to read some actual news, he would know that this is an American-born man who served in our military. And then something went horribly wrong. And that does not just happen to people who practice the Muslim religion. That, by the way, I would also like to point out, is the very foundation of these Proud Boys. And what's that other group that's gone under? It'll come to me, or you'll tell me. There's one of them that was, most of their adherents are currently in jail for January 6th and related activity, but their whole thing was to appeal to military veterans and law enforcement officers who were white and Christian. So I would like to point out that the fact that the guy served in the military means that he served in the military, but all kinds of people who have served in our military somehow, for various reasons, run off the path of righteousness. They just kind of, something goes wrong. And we're working on that, by the way. We're working on finding out what makes people who have served vulnerable to extremism of every sort and any sort. It's very, very real and not, in fact, I would posit, and this is me getting out the speculator here, my favorite tool, I would posit that it's not just Muslim veterans. What is it? The Proud Boys, and what was that other group? The one that appealed to the right-wing people who showed up. It will come to me. You know when it'll come to me? It'll be like 2 a.m. I'll wake up and go, oh my gosh, that's the name of the group. Or you'll text it to me. because you can text me here. 773-763-WCPT. That is 773-763-9278. We would love to acknowledge you on the air if you want to include your name, or if you just want to include your name and ask me not to give it, that's fine too. So, amazingly, the president, or not so amazingly, the president gets out in front of all this and marches to his own erratic drummer, and the president-to-be calls this an incident of immigration, even though that has nothing, absolutely, maybe less than nothing to do with the incident in New Orleans. But I would like to point out that the FBI showed up and got right on it. The same FBI that Donald Trump would like to destroy as being a member of, quote, the deep state, close quote. This is the same FBI that shows up and right away starts answering our questions about who did this, what's his background, where, what are his connections. This FBI that we rely on, we're about to turn over to a completely unqualified Trump appointee if he is confirmed, because of some bizarre paranoia about a made-up thing called the deep state. And this at the same time that Trump goes on and on about how much he loves our military. Well, our military does great stuff, and our military is some entity that we can and should and do, for the most part, support. We would not be able to live our lives as we do if we did not have the service of those men and women. And Trump, sometimes when it's convenient for him, acknowledges this, but then he just forgets all about it when the person who drives a pickup truck around a police car as fast as he can into a crowd of innocent civilians happens to be a veteran. If we had elected a better person as the next president, what might that person have said in the wake of this? What do you think that person might have said with the information we have? I'll just leave that set with you and take your thoughts. 773-763-WCPT. Let's go to Marty in Chicago. Hi, Marty. Welcome to WCPT.
Hey.
Hi.
Hi. Hey, Tori. How you doing? Happy New Year.
Thank you.
So today I was musing about this very same topic, and I posted on my Substack, which if anybody wants to read, Marty.
Marty. Yep. We're not going to do that. But, we're really not.
No. But
I'm really not going to do that. You want to talk to me? You talk to me.
Yes, of course, Tori.
Okay.
But right, exactly right. Well, so basically, my whole point was that that the radicalization and rhetoric of the military could be tied to Trump's direct, his direct demeaning of the military over and over again. And the reason why I pointed it out is because I took the time to gather together all of these examples where Trump has disrespected the Medal of Honor, the Arlington Cemetery, desecrated John McCain's service because he was captured, and disrespected Gold Star families. I mean, his campaign this year, in his rallies, he would feature a commercial that basically said, "Oh, this is Biden's military," right? And it showed transgender people, putting on their uniform, whatever. They can do whatever they want to do in their free time. And he said, "Oh, this is our military." And he clips to Full Metal Jacket, an anti-war movie, but he was showing how Arlie Emery was yelling at the "Show me your war face" and all that. Trump has no respect for our military. He has no respect for our veterans at all. He's shown this over and over again. He's shown his true colors on this. He has zero respect for the military. So that being said, I can understand why people that are fighting, that are dealing with, he said PTSD people are just not strong. That was another example that I found. God. So, no. And the reason why I pointed out is because I was very proud that I was able to gather up all of these examples. And I'm saying,
I'm glad that you can.
Trump is responsible.
But he certainly
Trump is, but
he gives, if I can consolidate what you've said here, with his abuse and misuse of people's military service, he's given people permission to denigrate the military and the people who serve when it's convenient for them. Thank you for calling, Marty. I appreciate it. Please do not come on here and pimp your business or your website or with all due respect, get your own talk show. Let's go to Will. Will, welcome. You're on WCPT.
Hi, how you doing?
I'm here.
Yes, good. That's good. Yes, the other group you were trying to think about was called the Oath Keepers.
Ah, thank you. Now maybe I'll sleep through the night. I was really worried there because, that always comes to you at 2 a.m, that name you couldn't remember. Yes, the Oath Keepers. They specifically recruited from amongst the military for the most right-wing extreme activities. And yet when this person who apparently has become had become an adherent of some ISIS-inspired group, when he committed an atrocity, everybody goes, "Oh well, it's because he's Muslim," and nobody that I've seen has bothered to point out we've got plenty of white Christian nationalists committing or ready to commit an equal number of atrocities, including beating Capitol Hill police officers with metal poles and worse. So, yes.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely. You are correct. Was
there more? So, I'm sorry, I ran right over you there in my excitement you gave me the name of the Oath Keepers. Go ahead.
No. It's unfortunate, but it's true. It is so true. And, it's just the media, they wanted Trump to win, bottom line, and they got what they wanted.
Wait a minute. I'm not sure I agree with you there. Talk to me more about that.
Well, the way that they purposely slanted things.
Who's the they? We got a lot of media here. Who specifically?
Okay. Well, let's see. The New York Times, the Washington Post, CNN.
You think they wanted Trump to win?
Absolutely.
Oh, I completely disagree with you on that. I absolutely disagree with you. Tell me why you think, and by the way, almost all these publications that you've mentioned pointedly did not endorse Donald Trump in the last election. So what makes you feel that they did the job?
By the way that they reported, and by not reporting. I mean, WCPT as well as other stations would mention all of his flaws and his missteps and say, why isn't the media pointing this out? And, what's the problem? But yet if Joe Biden does one little thing, then all of a sudden it's national news.
Well, okay. I am a reader of these publications and a viewer of many that you mentioned. And specifically the New York Times, which is where I begin every day, they most definitely did fact check Donald Trump. And they had articles on his mental competence. And they had articles on the hypocrisy and of course, they're on the journalism page. They simply have to do it on a fact basis. But in their editorial pages, even their conservative editorialists were assailing Donald Trump. So on the basis of what I've read there, I have to disagree with you respectfully. They did not in any way, shape, or form give Donald Trump a pass. But where I do think there's a little bit of a spark of accuracy in your claim that the media gave Donald Trump the White House. And again, I disagree. But I think there was this soul searching after the first time he was elected, where people said, did we just give him too much of a platform and give him too much credit for being someone or give him not enough credit for being electable and then just look at him as some kind of a circus act. And by doing so, give him a forum for this crazy stuff he was perpetuating. And so I think this time they tried to not just cover every nut bucket thing that he said, because they felt like they'd gone too far the last time. And so that may be the reason for your perception that the media was too light and gentle. It may be that they simply didn't want to give him the same size stage. And you will remember, Will, that at the beginning of the election cycle, which basically was the day that Joe Biden took office, everybody thought that Donald Trump was done for. We all thought he was, basically politically 6 feet under. So that may be what happened, that we just didn't, we underestimated. Like the Wicked Witch of the West. Curses, somebody always rescues that girl. It may have been like that. We may just...
Can I,
sure, go ahead.
Can I ask you?
Yeah.
Real quick.
Yeah.
Did you think that Vice President Harris was going to win? Or did you think Donald Trump was going to win?
Well, I'm going to have to give you a slightly longer answer there because I went door knocking every single Sunday for almost 2 months in Wisconsin.
Uh-huh.
And based on what I found on the other side of those doors, I did not believe that that Vice President Harris would win because there were people who really should have been voting for her who were going to be voting for Donald Trump against their own self-interest and seemingly blithely unaware that they were voting against their own self-interest. So on that basis, I have to say that although I kept knocking on those doors and dropping off that literature, and I was up in Racine on election day, and I did not have a lot of hope for her. I just didn't, because he did too good a job, Donald Trump, of convincing people that the biggest problem was our southern border and not the fact that all he really cared about were the billionaires who he wants to emulate. So there you go. That's my answer.
I got you.
Right.
I did not knock any doors, but I did support her, and I am a Democrat. But I knew 3 months before the election she was going to lose. I knew he was going to win.
And you did that without freezing in Wisconsin. Good for you there, Will. You knew more than I did going in. Thank you for calling. It's 21 minutes after 2 o'clock. I'm Turi Ryder. In a few minutes, you're going to meet somebody who wrote some beautiful pieces about reimagining yourself and your career in the year ahead. So that'll be on the way in just a few minutes. But more of your calls and texts about what Donald Trump extrapolated simply from the name of the New Orleans shooter and what that says about him in a minute. 773-763-WCPT is where you can call or text us.
Choose Views with Richard Chew.
The badassery in us has to come out. It just does. Shake off the fear, shake off the worry, and be ready to do something. Like Mrs. Obama said, now we really have to do something. And the number one thing is connect with each other and be strong and support those who we care about and make sure that we are moving forward and protecting this process.
Richard Chew, weekday mornings at 6 on WCPT 820.
Because facts matter. You're listening to WCPT 820.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive. Filling in today for Joan, radio personality and author Turi Ryder.
2:23. I am Turi Ryder in for Joan Esposito. Looking ahead, you get lots of good talk and conversation and guests coming up tomorrow morning. Choose Views. Richard Chew will be taking your calls, and he will be speaking with Karen Byrne of the True Blue Politics podcast. That all starts, as it ever does, weekdays from 6 to 8 in the morning on WCPT. That's 6 to 8 Chicago time, because we are the center of the universe as well as the center of America. Everybody knows that. Looking at some of your texts, I want to thank you all so much for texting. I'm loving that. We'll begin with Rena, who texted us that the two incidents, I think she's specifying New Orleans and Las Vegas, massive security failures. Let the finger pointing begin. I think for New Orleans, it's when you're willing to drive a pickup truck into a crowd of people and die, yes, they took the bollards down to fix them, but there was a cop car parked right there. And the guy just drove around. I think what we need to consider, Raina, when we look at this stuff is that if you're really willing to lose your life, it's very hard to keep somebody from doing horrific things. All we can do is improve our intelligence so that maybe we can get a handle on people who are planning to do these things. And if we get this head of the FBI that Trump is asking for, Cash, whatever his name is it Patel? I don't think, I'm so bad with names. The guy who wants to dismantle the deep state FBI, it'll be so much worse for us. And then we'll need all our fingers to point. All of them. Going to the next thing. Oh, gosh, I love these texts. You guys are great. Turi, they are the Oath Keepers. Thank you. Yes. Oh, gosh, where would I be? You guys are like my walking memory. All the Oath Keeper folk who knew that it was the Oath Keepers. I am grateful. The rest of us need protection from the Republicans, their greed, corruption, immorality, and endlessly exclusive self-interest. When we, the working class, forget that, we will lose. And then I love this Trumpism bigly. Those among us who have no problem exploiting the majority are generally quite well off already, if not extremely well off. They leverage that wealth to corrupt the system. Yeah, that's what our incoming guy is going to be doing, leveraging that wealth. Susan and Wheaton, yes. The one percenters, another group, yes. Another group very prominently active in the extreme right wing, and many of them veterans, and also Susan mentioned Oath Keepers. And yes, someone who assessed the right wing as being ascendant and said that most of the black population would have agreed with my assessment that we weren't going to go with Kamala. You know, sometimes I hate how right you guys are. It's really hard sometimes how right you are on the calling and the texting. So now what I thought was really interesting about these two recent incidents, the exploding Tesla Cybertruck and the New Orleans thing, is how quick Americans are to try and link these two things together. That began almost immediately. Find the link. And maybe I'm just a Luddite, or maybe I'm just screwy to say that just because two horrifying and newsworthy and lots of imagery on your TV set things happen close together, it does not mean that they are connected. And now we've got it in the news, and I would like to fault the news here for saying, yes, there is a connection. They're both veterans, both the assailant in New Orleans and the person who died in the Cybertruck explosion, who also had a bullet in the head. They were both veterans and both at Fort Bragg. Well, as they finally pointed out in their news story, yeah, Fort Bragg is huge. That's saying like they were both from New York. Big deal. Until you've got some actual evidence connecting the two incidents, and these are my cohort, these journalists and these talk show hosts. Why can't people say we don't know? Why can't they just say, well, yeah, we have no proof that they're connected. We have no evidence that they're connected. We have some tangential piece of data that connects their physical proximity, maybe not even at the same point in time. I would file that under just calm the bleep down. Just calm the bleep down. The fact that two people breathed the same atmosphere within 10 miles of each other, possibly not even at the same time, but this is what we've got. We've got this escalating sense of paranoia, and it's all connected, and there's a deep state, and there's a dark this, and there's a nefarious plot, and there's a pizza parlor with a tunnel. And I mean, come on, everybody. Take a deep breath. And my own business, my own industry, these news reporters who are saying, well, you know, there is a connection. That was their headline. There could be a connection between the New Orleans incident and the exploding Tesla Cybertruck. And then they give like the shrimpiest piece of not even evidence. And I just want to go, this is why people don't trust us. Because there's nothing. You got a big nothing. You've got the evidential equivalent of a jar of marshmallow fluff. That's what you've got. So just take a breath. In a moment, somebody who came from that very business, the business of broadcasting, back, I would posit, when there was a bigger ethical and a center to it and a greater knowledge base working in it, and then found himself doing something completely different and wrote a piece that inspired me. So we're going to meet him in a moment. Someone who really has a great attitude about reimagining yourself and your career whenever that's necessary, and many people consider it, especially at this time of year. It's 2:30, WCPT, live, local, and progressive.
This is Chicago's Progressive Talk, 820 AM, WCPT Willow Springs, and online at WCPT820.com, where facts matter.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive. Filling in today for Joan, radio personality and author Turi Ryder.
I am all of those things. It is 2:33. I am Turi Ryder here for Joan Esposito, who returns on Monday. Coming in tonight, by the way, to drive you home from 5 to 7, Patty Vasquez. She's back. And this time she's going to be really here in person. She made a little bit of a liar out of me the other day. I thought she was coming in person. But that was okay because it was wonderful. Mr. Serrano was here, did a fine job. But she's going to be here in the flesh. Not only will she have film critic Mike Crawley with her, she'll also have a gift card for Fry the Coop to give away. So drive it home with Patty tonight starting at 5. Joining me now, what some of us in the business are calling the other Dan Mason. Welcome, Dan Mason, to WCPT. Are you routinely referred to as the other Dan Mason? I just have to ask you, and then I'll explain why to folks who don't know, which is most of our listeners.
Usually go by 2.0. I'm usually Dan 2.0.
Okay. Well, let me just, and you haven't heard this story. So a friend of mine who follows you on LinkedIn, as do I, sent me a column and said, Dan Mason wrote this column. It's amazing. And this column, which you wrote, was about massive cutbacks in the broadcasting industry and how people should imagine themselves as bigger than their title and look at the skills they had rather than their title when they went on into the next career for them, whether that was in the broadcast industry, which is shrinking, or some other area. And we loved what you had to say, but we were a little surprised that Dan Mason, quote, close quote, had been saying this. So I'm reading it and I'm reading the comments, and somebody actually calls you on it or thinks they do and says, well, that's kind of unusual. You would write that column, Dan Mason, when you fired all those people at CBS a few years ago. And you wrote back, no, that's the other Dan Mason. At which point we all fell out laughing, going, oh, yeah, that's right. Because you also were at CBS in Boston and you ran stations, if memory serves, in Sacramento. You were in this business for a long time, but you were the other Dan Mason and not the guy who sat in New York running CBS and has recommissioned or decommissioned or wasn't known for having a huge heart for the employees. Let's put it that way. Would that be accurate, you think?
Oh, I don't know if that's accurate or not, but certainly there was somebody with my same name who was the CEO and is in the broadcasting, the Radio Hall of Fame out there in Chicago, and I'm not that person.
Right.
Sort of working at the ground level for a lot of years.
Well, you did a lot, but what you're doing now, I'll let you explain it and define it a little bit, but what I love about what you're doing now is helping people reimagine themselves with the skills that they bring in the ways that they want to work in the future. So could you explain what you did and your transition into what you do now and what you do now?
Sure. I mean, where I was at about 10 years ago is the same place that a lot of people, according to Gallup, are at right now. We're heading into this age in the workforce that Gallup is calling the Great Detachment. that people just are not engaged or satisfied with their career. In fact, only 18% of employees would say that they really love their job. 51% are looking for new opportunities this year, which is actually higher than the number we had during the Great Resignation of the pandemic. So why is that? Well, I'll speak for myself. I had a great career in radio for many years. It was really exciting. I loved being able to serve our communities. I loved being able to use my voice to be the one friendly voice in somebody's day. I loved creating memorable experiences for listeners at the events and the concerts we produced. But eventually, for a lot of us, as we get older and we approach midlife, the thrill is gone. It's sort of like being in the marriage that lost its spark. And like most people, rather than start to imagine, well, maybe there's a new way I could repurpose myself, I did what many people do and just started chasing bigger jobs for more money in bigger cities and thought, hey, this will be the answer. And the higher that I got up the ladder, the more I realized the only real prize I was getting was more stress, more responsibility, more pressure to perform in a job that I wasn't lit up or excited by anymore. And that can lead to a bit of an existential crisis, especially for those of us who identify as being a high achiever or a successful professional. Because if I walk away from this career that I know I'm good at and I try something new and it fails, well, then it's not just losing a career, it's losing my identity. So that really put me on a personal growth path to figure out not just what I did for a living, but who was I? What is my purpose? What could I contribute in the second chapter of life? And everything that I learned on that journey has now led me to launching an international coaching practice over the last 10 years where I've been able to serve people across 22 countries that are going through the same thing.
There are a lot of us going through the same thing. There's a joke amongst on-air talent that the happiest people in any radio station are the part-timers, which I've actually found to be true after years and years and years of doing 3-4 hour talk shows every day in cities large and small. This is fun. This is like getting to have radio dessert when I come in. And I think one of the things that you wrote, there were so many things that you wrote in your LinkedIn column, and I would encourage anyone who finds what Dan has to say interesting or useful to find him on LinkedIn where you can read his posts. One of the things that you posted was, and I'm going to quote you here, leverage your gifts, not your title. Your role doesn't define you. The unique combination of expertise, creativity, and leadership you bring to the table is where your true value lies, and it's transferable. I mean, right there, what you said was so important. People, it's more of what you said in a way. People claim this title and they let the title of what they do define them, as opposed to saying, well, why do I have that title? What do I bring to the company? What did I bring to my clients? What did I bring to my associates that got me that title? So it seems to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, that what you're saying when people look at how they want to position themselves in 2025 is think less about the title you want or the title you have and do a deeper examination of what are your specialties and what are the things that you offer that are that can go with you anywhere, like a turtle's shell. Have I got that right?
Yeah, I would say that's a fair representation. And if I could maybe speak to it in a slightly different way, most people begin a career reinvention journey thinking of, okay, what is my skill set? But when you think of your skill set, now when I was and I worked in music radio for many years, I was like, well, my God, I played Taylor Swift songs for 14-year-olds. Like, how does that transfer in the general market? Like, I schedule music logs and I deal with salespeople on sponsorships. Like, I don't know how any of this translates outside of the world. Now, those were my skills. The skills, though, that you have in whatever line of work you happen to be in are just a series of tasks that you have repeated over and over and mastered through repetition over a number of years. But what's interesting is your skill set isn't always the thing that brings you joy. Now, the better place to work from is thinking...
I want to pause you right there, because I would argue with what you've just described yourself as doing, having also been years of music radio in my resume, I would say that one of the things that you get from having played Taylor Swift for 14-year-olds is an ability to, assuming you're still at one of those stations where you got to talk to the 14-year-olds, is that you got to interact with people and get them excited about new art, new music, or an artist, provide them with information, and do it in a way that they took in and appreciated. So I'm not so sure that you aren't just reducing what you did by a little bit too much.
Although you're actually getting to my point.
Oh, good.
Those were the things that were on the resume that are skills. The real powerful place to operate from is, what are my gifts? What are the things that come easy to me? What are the things that I'm doing where 4 hours could fly by and feel like 40 minutes? What are the things intrinsic to me that light me up and allow me to add the most value to the world? So my gifts, as you were just speaking about, well, building community, right?
Yes.
Engaging with people,
yes.
Being a public speaker, being a content creator, as a manager and a program director of radio stations. I was a leader. I was an encourager, a cheerleader. I could help teams set audacious goals and create plans to achieve them. So once I could start to view my career from 30,000 feet up and look at the gifts, then I could start to create a new map for where I wanted to go. The interesting thing is that many of us have skills that don't make us happy, but we've rehearsed them over and over. A lot of times our inherent gifts we might not be using every day in our job, and we haven't rehearsed them to the point of turning them into skills. But that's where the magic is in any career reinvention, is moving the conversation away from skills to gifts.
All right, let's go with that. So if you're listening and you're thinking, all right, so I'm not so sure, as Dan is describing it, that I even necessarily know or could identify what my gifts are. So, Dan, not everybody's going to have the good fortune to work with a career coach, nor necessarily have the funds to do it. How do you recommend that someone assess their gifts and talents if they don't have the benefit of a professional career coach, which is what you are now? I mean, my first thought would be ask your friends, but what would you suggest?
You could certainly ask friends what they see within you that are your strengths. You could also think about, what are the things that people come to me the most often for? What are the things that I just know more about than the average person? For me, growing up in high school, I was always kind of like the Oprah of my friends, for better or worse. Like, people would usually come to them people would come to me when they needed a sympathetic ear or somebody to talk through a problem that they were having. But everybody's got that thing you know more about, or that you just have some wisdom about more than other people. Maybe you know about investing. Maybe you know about a home interior decorating, or you know about the real estate market. Start to mine those things. What do people come to me for?
Oh, I love that. I love that question. So, okay, you're making notes. Point number one, when you're reassessing what you might want to do and where your gifts are, what do people come to me for? Perfect. That is fabulous. Okay, what else?
Also start to think, a lot of times we roadblock ourselves because we make this reinvention an intellectual exercise. It's not always an intellectual exercise. It's actually an emotional one. What was I doing the last time I felt most lit up and alive? What was I doing? Who was I with? What activities were I engaging in? And really, who was I being in that moment? As you can start to mine for, when do I feel most lit up? There's a lot of wisdom in that for people.
That sounds like it would be good on two fronts, to find out what the subject was, and also whether you most like to work one-on-one or in a group, or performing in front of an audience. It sounds like the setting could tell you a lot as well. Is that correct?
Yeah. Was I being creative? Was I being a leader? Was I in community with other people? This will start to help you tap into what your values are. And from there, again, this is just the way we start to build a blueprint for the next chapter, because you do want to be aligned with your purpose and your values.
I like this. Okay, stand by, and then we're going to talk a little bit about, once you've done this sort of assessment, what is the next step in the plan. So we're going to learn more about this. You're hearing Dan Mason, very successful, and you can hear why. Career coach, came out of broadcasting and took the skills and talents that he found he had for work he no longer enjoyed and repurposed them, and now helps others do the same, find their gifts and use them where they will be most appreciated, enjoyed, and would help you if these were your gifts. It's 2:47. I'm Turi Ryder. It's Joan Esposito's show, WCPT, live, local, and progressive.
Hey, Google, play WCPT.
Streaming Chicago's progressive talk from TuneIn.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive. Filling in today for Joan, radio personality and author Turi Ryder.
It is 2:48, and joining me on WCPT and for Joan is Dan Mason, who had a really outstanding career in broadcasting and then found there was no real joy in it for him anymore. And he repositioned himself and redefined his purpose. And now he is a career coach. And I love it that he doesn't just take anybody. You actually have to apply to him to be taken on as a client. Is that accurate, Dan?
Yes, there is an application that's on my website. I want to make sure that my clients are the right fit and that I'm the right fit for them to help them with where they want to go.
And so I will ask you, just so people can find you, where can they find you? You want to give that information?
Sure. You can go to my website, which is creativesoulcoaching.net. Or if you want to give me a follow on Instagram, you can find me there at CSC Dan Mason. And if you look me up on LinkedIn, I'm pretty active there also.
Yes, that's where I first started reading your thoughts. So where we left off was assessing the things that make you great and inspire you and get you to your creative spot. So if you, as a client, have now done this work, and you know what it is you feel good doing, and you know where you make a contribution, but you don't quite know how you're going to make a living doing it. What is the process to try and figure out how you can take your particular talents or skills and manage to keep the lights on using them? What's that process look like?
Okay, so this is the answer that is honest, but nobody likes, because we are an instant gratification society. We're used to clicking the button on Amazon Prime and having something on our doorstep the next morning.
It's creepy how they do that. Very creepy. Go ahead.
The process of getting clear on a purpose statement, I can help a client do that in one session. However, the process of how do I take that purpose and bring it to life and monetize it is a bit of a discovery process. And it really is a little bit of trial and error. You know, when I was leaving the radio industry, two things that I knew that I loved were writing, and I knew that I loved theater. I was actually a performing arts major for a while in college. So in my mind, I thought I was going to write the next great American Broadway play. So while still employed at my final radio job in Florida, I was flying to Manhattan on weekends and going to writing workshops with a pretty well-known Broadway professional. And what I quickly assessed after about 4 weeks of doing these workshops is, as much as I love writing, I didn't love writing plays or characters or dialogue. I just didn't have that gift, and I didn't enjoy it much. However, in meeting in going to those workshops, I made friends with somebody who could tell that I was just having like a bit of a spiritual crisis, a midlife crisis, if you will. He referred me to a coach. That coach became my first mentor, and I was so moved by the things that I started learning about myself with no intention of ever turning it into a business. I went on meetup.com and started facilitating some free workshops for other unfulfilled professionals in midlife. I was just teaching the things that I was learning about myself. And as those clients started to have these life-altering transformations, people asked me if they could pay me to coach them privately.
Oh, my gosh. So it was like it was the great unexpected lottery win there, that you bought a ticket thinking, oh, maybe I'll get a free donut out of this, and you ended up with them backing a Career Brinks truck up to your door.
I wouldn't even say that it's like winning. It's not like to say it's like winning the lottery is like saying that, it's a 1 in a million thing. What I've realized, and now that I've coached thousands of people through this process of the last decade, is that as you take one step in the direction of your future, life has a way of taking 10 steps toward you. I think a lot of times, particularly for us overachievers and high performers, we want to have the whole map ahead of the journey. We want to know every step on the process to get there.
But it's not predictable, is it? It's really not predictable.
Yeah, any life transformation requires two things. You need clarity and you need courage. Unfortunately, most of us get it in the wrong order. We think that we need perfect clarity. We need to know the exact plan. We need perfect clarity on how we're going to make the money and that the opportunity will be there and we won't fall on our face and won't look like an idiot. And if we know all these things, then we'll act with courage. But that's not really the way life works. If you think about anything...
Well, that's not particularly courageous either. If you actually know how it's all going to go, then where are the parts in that I'm trying not to say rude words. So, it doesn't take a lot of moxie to do the thing that you can already see the end of. So I take your point. We don't have a lot of time, and there's a question I really want to ask you, and it's also been something that I've wrestled with when I see it with other people in my line of work. If you are lucky, the thing that you love to do is something you're talented at doing. But I have seen, and I know you have seen in this business, that talent and the gifts are not evenly distributed. And just because somebody loves something does not necessarily mean that he or she has a talent for it. And it may be that people have come to you with a true love of some particular thing, and it becomes clear, at least to you, if not to them, that this is an area where they are not particularly gifted. And so my question is, has that happened to you? I'm guessing you're going to say yes, and that's where the sorting process comes in. And when it does happen, how does one encourage someone to do something that they desperately want to do, but clearly are not gifted in that area?
Look, there are some things in some professions that require a deal of technical knowledge. Obviously, if you're going to go become a heart surgeon, you better have a lot of training and be very skilled at what you do. And and that's what the med school process is for. I think what you're getting at is for the people who are maybe more creative-minded,
yes,
who are speakers, who are authors. And here's the thing: I've never ever in 10 years told somebody that they are not equipped to do the thing that they want. I think the challenge is that most people think that they need an audience of 5 million people in order to prove themselves or to be enough. And we live in an age right now for the creative person who just wants to share their writing, who wants to share their voice. There's no barrier to entry on these things. We live in an age where I know you're an author, Turi. Well, you could go on Substack and start writing a daily newsletter or maybe a weekly newsletter. And for $5 a month, people could pay because they agree with your vision or they agree with your points of view. And now if you get, 5,000 people, that's all you need is an audience of 5,000. Now you're making $25,000 a month.
Well, it's funny you should mention that because somebody just gave me the data that a successful podcast, wait for it, gets 150 regular subscribers. That puts you above the norm. Can you imagine? I mean, I do a podcast.
I had a podcast for 3 years. We debuted #1 on iTunes. I never made a penny off sponsorship. I wasn't doing Blue Apron reads and endorsements. However, sharing my journey and sharing my thoughts led to getting so many clients that helped me eventually make more money than I ever could have made in terrestrial radio.
So what you're saying, if I hear you correctly, is if your creative desires aren't necessarily going to make you, let's say you want to be a stand-up comic and you're not going to be the next Seinfeld, but probably with the opportunities we have now to build a smaller stage and get it out there all over the world, you might get the kind of audience that you need to encourage you to keep doing this thing that you love, and it doesn't have to be a vast audience.
Yeah, I mean, look, not every stand-up comic needs to be Seinfeld to be successful. You don't need a long-running syndicated show that you're living off the royalties on. There are plenty of comics that have a following. They built it on TikTok. They built it on Instagram, and they're able to go out and tour and sell out audiences. I would argue the world doesn't need another Jerry Seinfeld. They would just need that person's brand of stand-up comedy, for the audience that you need. So it's really about having the courage to put yourself out there, to find your tribe, and to build that community. And as you're offering value, of course you can monetize it.
So you've never had to have what I call the Bob Fosse conversation, my favorite movie, All That Jazz, where there's a dancer that he's sleeping with and she's asking if she gets her breasts done, if she gets her nose done, would she? And he says to her something that I've treasured. He says, I can never make you a great dancer, but if you work very hard, I can make you a better dancer. So do you have that conversation where, I can't make you the thing you totally want to be, but I can make you better at the thing you totally want to be?
Look, again, I would get into this. It's not about being the best at anything. It's about being the best, being the best in one field. It's about being the best version of you and the best at what you do. There are a million career coaches and life coaches. If you look on Instagram, you'll find them everywhere. I just happen to know that there aren't many people that have the gifts and the skill sets and the blueprint that I do to help lead a client to transformation. So all I need in the course of a year is 50 to 100 people, and I'm good.
Good. Well, we're going to leave it there. I think you've given people plenty to plan with their next year. Give the website one more time.
CreativeSoulCoaching.net.
Thank you so much for sharing your gift, your talent. I appreciate it. That is Dan Mason, WCPT, just about 3 o'clock. And coming up, who will eat your old Christmas tree? Who will eat it?
Remember when you get to work to hop over to WCPT820.com or the TuneIn Radio app and stream The Stephanie Miller Show. Weekdays 8 to 11 a.m. on Chicago's Progressive Talk, where facts matter. WCPT 820, Chicago's Progressive Talk, where facts matter.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive. Filling in today for Joan, radio personality and author, Turi Ryder.
It is. I am. 5 minutes after 3 o'clock, I am Turi Ryder. Yes, I am the author, Turi Ryder, as mentioned by Dan Mason. You can find my book at your neighborhood independent bookstore. Ask them to get it for you. Or, those people who can magically get stuff to your doorstep within 24 hours so that you, in your most paranoid moments, think that a plane is circling over your house and dropping plumbing parts on your front porch. How do they know? How did they do it? We don't know. But they have my book also. Yes, you will get to hear Who Eats Your Christmas Tree coming up. A quick check of the texts regarding the strange but not necessarily meaningful connection between New Orleans and Las Vegas explosion and murder. They both rented vehicles from the same rental car company. And so let's have a little responsibility in the media. Also, I did not say most blacks were not voting for Harris. I don't know who you heard, but it was some other talk show host. 6 minutes after 3 o'clock, let us go to, I have to disclose here, this person you're about to meet, one of my beloved friends. And she's also a very talented ICU doctor, palliative care specialist, was, I don't know if you would want to call her the star, the major character in an Oscar-nominated short documentary. And her cause in life lately, in addition to being a wonderful doctor, is helping people navigate end-of-life decisions. Dr. Jessica Nudek-Zitter is an ICU doc at their equivalent in California of Stroger Hospital, big county hospital. You get shot, you get stabbed, that's where you want to go. But they treat everybody, whether you have money or not, which is sort of how it came to be that you got involved in the motivation behind your current documentary. Jessica Nittick-Zitter, welcome to WCPT. Tell us about what you're doing now.
Oh, hello, Turi. It's as always great to talk to you. Yes, this film that I am making that's about to come out, actually, called The Chaplain and the Doctor, has been a good 6 years in the making. And honestly, when it started, I didn't realize that I was making a film. It just really came about because the woman that I have been working with for over a decade, Chaplain Betty Clark, has really just been this incredible inspiration to me in the way that I practice medicine and the way I think about healthcare, and frankly, in the way I think about living as just a human being on this earth. So I wanted to make a film about our relationship.
Well, one of the things that I noted in the I forget if you told me the story or I saw the story, because your writing is so visual. Jess has also written a wonderful book called Extreme Measures, Finding a Better Path to the End of Life. And there was a conversation you had with a young black man whose father or grandfather was in your ICU, and you had said to him, you can decide now if you want us to keep working medicine upon your, was it father or grandfather, even though he's coming he's coming to the end of his life now, or you can decide to bring him home and make him comfortable as he comes to the end of his life now. And this young man said to you, and you told me it just broke your heart, are you saying this to me, that there's nothing else you can do because we're black? And you said to him, I'm really sorry you have to ask that question, and I understand why you're asking that question. And I am telling you that in this moment, there is nothing that our Western medicine can realistically offer your dad. And was that, I mean, would you talk about how that came to be, that you work with the chaplain in the black community, because that's primarily where she works, of Oakland?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think that story that happened to me so many years ago. It was probably when I worked in New Jersey, so it would have been at least 15 years ago. That really stuck with me, and I was so, because I thought that I had this trusting relationship with this man, and we were really talking about good end-of-life decision-making, and I realized that there was something else going on for him that had nothing to do with the actual decision-making. It had to do with a personal feeling and a personal distrust, and that, to be honest, is something I didn't even understand the way I do now at that time, because you can understand things cognitively, and you can hear about the Tuskegee, research, the very, very unethical research and things that were done on the black community. You can read the book about Henrietta Lacks, but until you actually have a personal connection to somebody who's going through that, who has experienced, a healthcare system distrust, you don't necessarily understand it in your heart. And that's what Betty has helped me to understand in a better way.
I'm so glad that you have her as your spiritual guide through this, if you will, because that conversation here in Chicago, where I am, where you're not, we are getting all kinds of data about life expectancy disparities between communities of color and more affluent and historically white communities. And people, I mean, data point after data point keeps showing up. And in the, white people are like, well, why would that be? But you're working with people who understand exactly why that would be. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, I think, when you start paying attention to it, if you're a doctor like me and you start to say, wait a minute, there's a lot going on here that, just distrust. But then you start to look at the medical literature, and it is just in every possible medical subspecialty, there is some evidence of disparity between the way white patients are treated and the way non-white patients are treated. And that starts to grab your attention, just the incredible, just a mass of data about this topic. And so, it's a reality. But again, in order to really care about the reality in a way that's going to change your practice as a healthcare provider, you have to feel some emotional connection to it. It can't just be some other data point on a PowerPoint that someone presents to you. It has to be something that's more personal. And I think that's what I'm hoping this film is going to help people to, especially healthcare providers, but hopefully everybody, to sort of start to understand that this is a real thing. This is something that we should all be caring about. This is something that will pull on all of our heartstrings to realize that this injustice is happening. And by the way, I just want to say another thing about this film. it's not just about anti-Black racism. What this film is looking at is, and that's a particular, angle upon which we're looking at this. But the higher level that we're looking at is implicit bias. We're looking at what happens when healthcare providers who have so much power over their patients have some kind of a pre-existing belief about them based on no knowledge, but just based on some aspect of their personhood, or their race, their ethnicity, anything. It could even be their personality. And what happens when your doctor comes to your bedside with preconceived notions about who you are? And I think that it's a bigger issue that we're trying to envelop here.
Well, let's talk about how you and the chaplain work together on this. What will people see in this documentary that's coming out in 2 weeks, is it?
About 2 or 3 weeks. Yeah, we're going to start our festival tour. In fact, next week we're scheduled to go to Skywalker Studios, which is the sort of preeminent place to do your sound mixing. We're doing the sound mix, and then we're doing color correction, and then we're going to have our mastered film sometime mid to third week of January.
I love working at Skywalker, by the way. I've done stuff up there. It's beautiful.
Oh, you have?
Yeah.
Oh,
so
I can't wait.
You'll have a good time. And
yeah.
So you're going to finish it up and get it out there. And what will people experience? What is the trajectory of this documentary? Give me some, is it long? Is it short?
Well,
is it something for families to watch? What's in it?
Yeah, it's a full feature film. And the other two films I've been involved with have both been, by coincidence, 24-minute short documentaries. So this film is it's just too long. There's too much about our relationship and the history of our relationship to put this into a 24-minute film. So it's an hour and 20 minutes. And the plan for this film is to get it out to as many audiences as we can, to get it out to the lay public. But I'm particularly, as you know, with my work, interested in helping to change the culture of medicine and helping to bring back a certain type of humanity to medical culture that has been lost. And the films that I make and the stories that I tell are really about pointing attention to places where we can do better. And so we really have a big impact plan, engagement plan, just to share this with as many medical schools and residency programs and fellowships and hospitals and hospital systems as possible, with not only the film itself, but actually a whole new sort of educational approach that I've created that uses micro clips from the film that are really particularly emotionally priming to get a conversation started about these really tough topics.
All right. So let's cut to some of those chases. Give me 3 or 4 points where you feel the medical profession tends to screw up and you want to see them do better. Give me some specific examples.
Okay, so the first one is this concept of bias. We doctors are so into short-cutting things and having medical language so that we can we sometimes feel like insiders and sometimes just get our day done more quickly because it's a lot of pressures. So really understanding that when we shortcut things, we end up shortcutting the patient and we shortcut ourselves. And so really understanding the importance of getting the story and being curious and connecting with people around fact, not fiction, that we are passed from another provider, the shorthand fiction. The second thing I would say
stop,
that we want
because I didn't quite understand what you were. How does that play out at the bedside or in the office? What does that look like when someone comes in and instead of just giving them a bunch of medicalese, what do you suggest instead? What is the conversation and where does it happen?
Well, for example, and you see this in our film, if you have a patient who is billed to you as a difficult and angry person, you are going to walk into that room with more sort of trepidation. You're going to keep the person at arm's length. You're going to have ideas about what they're trying to get from you, and it's going to set up a sort of contentious relationship. It happens all the time. Provider to provider trying to make your day easier. Oh, this patient does this. Well, the patient in bed 5, they're drug seeking. The patient in bed 6, they're a gang member because they had a gunshot wound. Who knows if they're a gang member? One of the patients that we had a gunshot wound, and the patient was a postman and got shot when he was, delivering. I mean, it's very easy to make assumptions about people based on their disease or what's brought them into the hospital.
What if they really are a gang member? How can you comport yourself to see them as a human? I mean, you're in a county hospital. You look at gang members all day long. How do you interact with them?
You know what? You interact with them as a person. There's almost always, and this is what Betty has taught me, there is almost always a way to connect human to human to any patient. And when you do that, when you find some connect. And sometimes there isn't. Sometimes it's very, very hard to connect to somebody. And that I think is really important. Then we have to have other strategies. But most of the time, you can find some shared humanity with anybody. And that is something that we need to learn to do more as healthcare providers.
How do you do
I learned it through Betty.
How do you do it?
You do it by coming to the bedside and letting your defenses lower, because a big part of what we have is massive defenses. We don't want to look stupid. We don't want to be blamed. We don't want to be yelled at. And so we just sort of make it the patient's problem and assume that they're difficult, they have a personality disorder, et cetera. And I think what we need to do is we need to go into rooms with more open minds and really start to understand and get the patient's story. In fact, that's it should be the subtag of the film. Everybody has a story, because that's what Betty's shown me. You can get a story from anybody, and it changes your whole perspective on them.
So Betty, I'm assuming, is also a hospital chaplain. Is that true? Is that
yes,
where
she is? She is yeah, that's what she is. She's a hospital chaplain.
So you went around with her not as the doctor, but just as her apprentice to learn these things? How did you learn these things from her?
No, I'm really glad that you asked, because our relationship in the hospital is extremely unusual. It's very rare.
Okay, hold that thought. Hold that thought, because I'm going to ask you to explain it in just a moment. It's 18 minutes after 3 o'clock. You're hearing Dr. Jessica Nudek-Zitter. She's an author. She's been in several documentaries. I recommend her book to you, Extreme Measures, and her new documentary coming out, The Chaplain and the Doctor. In a few weeks, you'll be able to see it, stream it, and you're finding out about her work building bridges between communities that are typically often ill-served by the medical profession. More from her in just a moment on WCPT.
Hi, this is Patty Vasquez, and I'm thrilled to announce that Driving It Home with Patty Vasquez now has its very own podcast that you can subscribe to. Actually, 2 Driving It Home full episodes and Driving It Home featured interviews. You can subscribe to one or both. Just search for Driving It Home wherever you get your podcasts, or get the podcast links on my show page by visiting heartlandsignal.com and clicking on my picture.
Patty Vasquez, weeknights 5 to 7 on WCPT 820.
This is WCPT 820, where facts matter.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive. Filling in today for Joan, radio personality and author Turi Ryder.
Oh, sweet. 20 minutes after 3 o'clock for Joan Esposito. I am Turi with you, Rider Like a Truck. And yes, that's my book. And yes, that's my podcast. And with me now, Dr. Jessica Nudek-Zitter. I don't know if she wants to be thought of as a star, main character of an Oscar-nominated documentary called Extremis, which I highly recommend. It may be the best 20 minutes you spend in front of a screen, especially if you are connected to somebody who is coming to the end of the road. It's 2 different families who come in to her ICU and make 2 very different decisions. And her path, she also happens to be a friend of mine. Her path as an ICU and palliative care doc has been to assist people in making their own decisions about how they want to leave the earth, as much as any of us get to decide, and we don't all get to decide. But when we do, it's important to have good communication. And her new documentary, The Chaplain and the Doctor, is more of that conversation of how medicine and human beings interact. So just before we took our little pause, we talked about how she apprenticed herself or went around or made these connections with her friend, the chaplain, at what used to be Highland Hospital. I guess it's still called Highland Hospital, the county hospital in Oakland. Mm-hmm. How did your relationship come to be? How did it grow? What did it physically look like?
Well, it did not start out very well. It started out very hierarchical, which is a big part of the medical culture, where I thought that I was a doctor and I was running the team, and she was a chaplain, which is a nice to have, but it's not the reason people are coming to the hospital. And I didn't really pay much attention to her. I didn't think she had a whole lot to teach me. And in the beginning, there was even a little bit of testiness between us because I felt that she really was always sort of talking about racism and sometimes even implying that we as a team of white, mostly practitioners, were not being sensitive to our black patients. And it was hard. It was a little threatening. I'm like, look, I'm working in this hospital. I'm a progressive person. I'm trying to help. And I didn't really listen to her and felt kind of testy at times with her. And it just took some time. She's an incredible person. She's inspiring. Everything she says makes sense. And it just took me time to sort of start to process it. And she was this also very loving and forgiving person. So she was willing to sort of work with me as I had a lot of questions and had a lot of disagreements. And eventually over time, we just became very, very close friends. And we started to see patients really together. Most of the time we would see the patients together. And that's pretty unusual. Even on palliative care teams, the chaplain sort of does her thing separately and the doctors go and do their thing. And it was really my realization that spiritual attention and human attention, which is not something that we healthcare providers, doctors, are very good at doing, is really critically important, number one. And number two, best done with a more multi-dimensional team. And I really benefited from that.
What were some of the things that she attributed to racism that made you bristle in the early days of your relationship?
Well, she, really got upset. This is something we talk about in the film. At one point, she remembers, and actually it's funny because I don't remember this, but I believe her. She remembers that there was a patient who came in who had a gunshot wound, and that someone on the team, and she said that it was Jessica, but I'm like, really? But maybe it was me, said that they were a gangbanger. And she says this in the film. And when I heard her say that word, I knew that she thought this person was a thug, maybe deserved what he got, and probably that's true. And this particular patient was the guy I'm telling you about who was not at all
the postman.
a person who got this in any...
The postal worker. Oh, boy.
Well, he was not the postal worker, but he was another guy who wasn't out there, getting shot because he was doing something nefarious. And it was just a real education for me. I was very defensive when she first said it, and then she describes this all in the film. I kind of thought about it for a while, and I came to her and I said, you know what? She wrote this history that I told you that she got, that I didn't get, about who this person really was. And I came to her and I said, how did you do that? And she said, I just asked. And that was when I started to understand that there was some more for me to learn.
Huh. So I love it. And because I know you, I get the benefit of some of your, I guess some people would call these come to Jesus moments where people teach you things, which is kind of ironic since both of us are Jews. But there's this great moment you talk about in the documentary where you're just beginning your medical training and you're doing everything for someone who comes into the ICU, just doing everything. And clearly it's a point where everything isn't going to help. And a nurse picks up a phone and says, 911, there's a doctor torturing a patient in the emergency room.
Right.
And you had to stop. You had to stop and reconsider. And one of the things I think that is precious and rare about you is that you are willing to stop and reconsider. Does that typically happen with most people when you're trying to spread this word about building bridges between the medical community, the spiritual community, communities that have historically been ill-served by the medical profession because there's judgment and because there's racism or bigotry or whatever the wall is? Do you find that it happens in a moment, or do you find that you have to keep working at it over time?
Well, I'll tell you, gosh, you are a good interviewer. I think that most of us are very, very defended. I think we live in a rough world. I think healthcare is rougher than most. And I think that what we do as a human species is we build up our defenses. And so it's very hard, I think, for many of us to learn new things, and especially those things that make us feel like, oh, shoot, I'm not doing this right, or, oh, shoot, I'm going to get blamed or shamed or something like that. What I hope with our films, and what I really care about with our films, is not blaming doctors or healthcare providers, because we are doing our best. We're working really hard in very difficult circumstances. What I want people to understand is that we're all human, and I want people to look at me on the screen as what I would call a vulnerable narrator and show my mistakes and show that I'm still up there talking about them and I'm not dying. So, let's all enter into this conversation together. And I really think that when people watch it on the screen, this happens with medical audiences all the time when we show Caregiver a Love Story or we show Extremis, and I'm absolutely confident when we show the chaplain and the doctor. People see themselves on the screen and they in my form, and they see me making mistakes, and they see that I'm getting some benefit out of trying to learn more and then moving into a different place, and that it's okay to make mistakes, but it's also okay to try to sort of grow. And I think it just provides people with more of an incentive and more resilience to themselves, sort of think themselves about who they want to be and how they want to practice.
So it does sound like this is a process, and you are using the benefit of your many moments of enlightenment and then all the work that goes on between them to encourage them to take it on. I noticed that you said nobody wants to be shamed, nobody wants to be wrong. What about nobody wants to be sued?
It's so funny. Everyone always asks me that question. And the honest truth is,
See, sometimes I ask the normal question. Sometimes I ask it. What about it?
I don't think that suing is the biggest motivator for most doctors in the way they behave. I think it's much more of a personal protection in the moment. You don't want to look stupid and you don't want to get blamed on that day, in that moment, in that patient's room, or by your attending, or who knows what. I don't think people are as much thinking about suits and lawsuits. But again, some doctors, I work in a public hospital, get paid by salary. Most of my patients aren't going to go and sue. So I'm in a different situation than, who knows, a fancy orthopedic surgeon who, I don't know, whose patients might be more, I don't even know. But suing is not something that most of my colleagues think about.
It's interesting. I just had an interaction on behalf of an elder in a hospital in Chicago, not the hospital that I would have chosen. And it took me a while to figure out what was really going on with this particular young, I don't know, I think he was a resident. I think he was even the attending, but I might have been wrong about that. He was being asked a question that was just slightly out of his specialty, but not really anything that he wouldn't realistically have been able to handle. But he was afraid. It became clear to me that he wanted somebody else to say, this is what we're seeing. He didn't want to take the responsibility for that. Yeah. And is that common amongst medical professions, this sort of patient hot potato where nobody wants to be responsible? Or do we have doctors who all fight over, no, I'll take that, Gloria, I'll take that tough case, or something else?
Well, you know the answer to this, which is why you're asking the question. And the answer is very few people, very few physicians. And physicians are the ones honestly tasked with breaking bad news, because that's the job of the physician, and very few know how to do that very well. It's a real problem, and there's programs like Vital Talk, which is this terrific skill teaching program that my friend actually started, and it really helps you kind of learn and practice the skills of communication. But the fact is, most doctors hot potato it, or more commonly what they do is they just don't talk about it, and they just keep treating with intervention, more interventions, intervention after intervention, until the patient's on what I call the end-of-life conveyor belt, which is this horrible, horrible way to die.
It's like a car wash. Many people die. It's like a car wash. It's like when you go into one of those conveyor belt car washes and you feel your car lock in, and there's no way that you can say, I just want the rinse, don't spray me with the hot wax. If you didn't say it at the beginning, when your car goes in, you get the freaking hot wax, whether you want it or not. So I was actually asking you about a different thing where people have to look at test results or a slide or an image and make a decision, and they don't want to be responsible for that. They want the radiologist to look at it, even though they know very clearly what they're seeing. Is that a fault of hospitals that aren't giving their physicians enough power, or is it just the way that people go through medical school where they're shamed and blamed if they have a wrong answer? Are we setting up our training of doctors badly, I guess is what I'm asking.
Yeah, I think it's the latter. I think that the culture of medicine, which is one of my big tasks to try to change, is all about being right, knowing all the answers. And so what it does to the common person who never knows all the answers is it makes them not courageous, and it makes them retract and defend and not really speak honestly and bravely about what they know. A lot of times, and almost always, people know, doctors know what is likely to happen with somebody, and they just don't tell them because they don't want to be the person to upset the family or to tell them something that might be wrong. You know, one of the things I talk about is, what do you do? And I talk about this in my book. What do you do if you tell somebody a prognosis, I tell a family or patient, and the patient doesn't end up doing as badly as you said they would, meaning maybe they're still going to be comatose, but they'll be comatose for a few years instead of dying this month, as you suggested is likely to happen. People, when that happens, when doctors give a prognosis that's overly, but that it's not even that it's an overly pessimistic prognosis. It's that what they said was worse than what actually happened. People then pull back and don't ever want to give bad news again. They're like, oh, well, look what happened in this case. I gave this bad news and it wasn't as bad and I look like a fool. So that is a big part of what happens to people and makes them just say, well, I'm never going to give any bad news again. And that's what unfortunately is happening in our hospitals.
The Wiz, the Wicked Witch of the West and the Wiz. Don't nobody bring me no bad news. That's like my favorite theme song. Jessica Nudek-Zitter, I love and respect your work so much. And I'm going to be the first in line to see The Chaplain and the Doctor. Other people should watch for it. Your website, where can they keep track?
Come to realmedicinemedia.org. But I just want you to know that we're just doing it's going to be up and running next Tuesday, probably the 7th.
Okay.
The 8th to be safe.
Or just Google Dr. Jessica Nudek-Zitter and it'll take you to all the many, many wonderful things she's written and does. Thank you so much, Jess, and we'll talk soon.
Thanks, Turi.
That's Jessica Nudek-Zitter, author, medical practitioner extraordinaire, my dear friend, and the creator of this, The Chaplain and the Doctor documentary. You can see why this work is so important. In a moment, you're going to have a chance to meet someone who is working very hard for immigrant and refugee rights. So important here in the city, a sanctuary city and its environs. And he will be with us in just minutes on WCPT Live, Local, and Progressive. It's 3:34.
This is Chicago's Progressive Talk, 820 AM, WCPT Willow Springs, and online at WCPT820.com, where facts matter.
Joan Esposito. Live, local, and progressive. Filling in today for Joan, radio personality and author Turi Ryder.
It is 3:37. I am in for Joan as we start your 2025. People don't have to fill out checks anymore very much, so you don't get any practice writing the year until you get it wrong. I'd like you to meet Fred Tsao. He is a senior policy counsel at the Illinois Coalition for Immigrant and Refugee Rights, and I've invited him to speak today because we are about, as of January 20th, we're about to run into something we haven't seen in this nation in our generation, although I understand there have been great mass, I don't mean great in terms of good, I mean large deportations historically in the past, but not in our recent lifetimes. And here in Chicago, we consider ourselves a sanctuary city, which got us on the receiving end of Governor Abbott's busloads of people that he basically deployed as weapons, and actually managed to create some schisms between historically under-resourced communities in Chicago and new arrivals. And January 20th, we've got a president coming in who swears that millions of people are going to be removed from this country. So where are we with this whole situation? Thank you so much for joining me, Fred Tsao.
Good to be with you, Turi.
Where are we? What awaits us? I realize you don't have a crystal ball, but I'm guessing you have a speculator that's just as good as mine.
Well, we have what the incoming White House occupant and his team have been saying, specifically that Chicago is ground zero, that mass deportations are coming, that we're going to be seeing worksite raids, that many of the longstanding policies that had restrained ICE, that is Immigration and Customs Enforcement, from pursuing enforcement actions at certain locations institutions like churches, like schools, like medical facilities. That's going out the window. So, whether they're going to be able to pull all of this off is another question. But at least that's what they're saying. And they've been talking very big. They were talking very big during the campaign. They have not really shifted their rhetoric. And as we learned from last time around, we better take what they're saying seriously.
Yes, when someone tells you what they're planning to do, you would be a fool to assume that they're not going to do it, even though frequently Donald Trump says anything and doesn't do much of what he says. He's now appointing a lot of people who are zealots for these causes, and they may actually be able to do what I would consider to be some harm, and I mean harm in the form of ripping families apart, taking people who, if we had any kind of organized immigration system, would be on their path to citizenship now or already there. And these folks plan in their own terms to wage war on people who are undocumented. So what is your group doing to help folks who may be in some sort of jeopardy here?
Well, first and foremost, we need to remind everybody in the community that everybody in the United States has certain really basic fundamental rights under our U.S. Constitution. These rights apply to everybody. They apply to the people of the United States, not just citizens, not just people who are legally here, not just people who are born in the United States. They apply to the people of the United States. So what am I talking about? I'm talking about the right to be secure in your own home. So your house can't just be raided willy-nilly. ICE agents need a warrant. ICE agents can't force you to talk. So you have the right to remain silent, as we know from police procedurals going back decades.
Are they allowed? Well, let me pause you there. I know we've had some changes in laws about minors, whether police can lie to minors in the course of an investigation. In some states, it's legal for them to lie to a minor and not even to have a parent or guardian there during an interrogation. Is it legal in Illinois to lie to somebody about the rights that you have in an investigation?
Well, that is state law, and it controls state police and police departments and police officers within the state of Illinois. It does not, unfortunately, apply to federal agents.
So they can lie. They can say, we already have all this paperwork that shows that you're here without documents. They can say that even if it's not true.
Well, let's put it this way. During that whole episode with family separation under 1.0, when, parents and their children were being, torn apart at the border, yes. Border agents routinely lied to the children and the parents, basically assuring the parents that, we're going to, we're only going to be separated for a second or so. And, months, if not years later, many of these families remain separated. So I put no trust in the word of federal agents.
So if a federal agent says anything to you, you are documented or not, you just don't want to be part of the whole enterprise, what is your preferred response to be?
Yeah, everybody has the right to remain silent. This is basic. This is a basic right guaranteed under the Fifth Amendment. So you have the right not to incriminate yourself, and the safest policy is to just not answer the question.
I still remember, and this is so different from what you go through, I still remember my father saying to me, and I was driving after curfew in a snooty-galooty town, and they took me in, and I had, have something of an ethnic name, and the police officer of this snooty-galooty North Shore town said to me, my full name, which is Katura, which Turi is short for, what kind of a name is, and he gave my last name also, what kind of a name is that? And I said, I don't really see what my name has to do with the fact that I was driving at 12:15 in the morning in your snooty-galooty town. And he got, of course, that was not the right answer to give. On the other hand, when my father, bless his heart, came to collect me from the police station, he said something to me that I think, unfortunately, is true. He said, the police are always always right. Whether they're right or whether they're wrong doesn't matter. The police are always right until you get out of the police station. They're right. So that's actually true, because there's what's right, there's what's wrong, and then there's the fact that they can just kind of lose track of you in the police station for a while. So even if you have these rights, once they say, you know what, we would like to interview you here at the police station, you have to go with them, right?
Well, okay. I mean, first and foremost is trying to avoid getting arrested to begin with, or getting stopped to begin with. So that's why we try to, assure people that if an ICE agent shows up at your door, you don't have to open the door unless they have a warrant signed by a judge. They cannot compel you. They cannot sweet talk you into opening the door. And
how do they show you? How do they show you their warrant? They have to slide it under the door?
Slide it under the door, hold it up to a window, find another way to do it. But short of opening the door. Because once you've opened the door, even if you got a chain on it, it's off to the races.
Oh, really? So as soon as you open the door, they can come right in?
Yes, you've consented.
Wow. Even if the chain is on the door?
Yes.
Wow. That's impressive. Didn't know that. Okay, so don't open the door. But let's just say there was a very racist pamphlet that came out in Lincoln County, Oregon, that basically said, keep an eye on brown people and note down their license plates. And, we're going to be deporting all these brown people. Obviously, the sheriff of Lincoln County, Oregon, is horrified by this. He said you can send out any kind of thing that you want, but we're a sanctuary state. And, some of the things that they're offering to do in this letter are illegal. But the fact that they sent the letter isn't illegal. So let's just say that some neighbor, somebody says, pull over this car. I happen to know that they are in violation of whatever law or policy, and they pull you over. What are you obligated to give them? And what can you say? No, thank you. I don't choose to give you that.
Well, in the circumstances when your car gets pulled over, you can ask the reason why you're being pulled over. You do have to provide your license if you're operating the vehicle, as well as your proof of your vehicle registration and proof of insurance. At least here in Illinois, you do. You were perfectly within your rights to ask why you're being stopped, and also you have the right to ask, who are you? Which police department are you with? Are you a local officer, or are you an ICE agent? And if it's an ICE stop, they also need some reason why you're being stopped. There is in fact a court case, a court settlement that's grew out of a case here in Chicago that restricts ICE from being able to undertake warrantless searches, warrantless stops, and that includes traffic stops.
Huh.
So at least that policy is in place now. Now whether that's going to survive into the new administration is another question.
Oh, that's right. We have that lovely Supreme Court. Right.
Yeah. Well, we're going to do our best working with some of our friends in the legal world to make sure that policy stays in place.
What if you're a passenger in a car? Do they have the right to ask anything of you as a passenger?
Well, that's where the right to remain silent comes in. If you're not actually operating the vehicle, you can't be tagged with anything that has to do with the operation of the vehicle.
ID? Can they ask you for your ID if you're a passenger?
You don't have to give it to them. You can give your name if you want, but otherwise you can remain silent.
And on the street, if they go up to you and say, you fit the description of so-and-so, I want to see some ID?
Same thing.
You can say, I'm sorry, that's not probable cause. And then, of course, if they want, again, there's what's right, there's what's wrong, and what is. What happens if they say, well, you're not complying. We're just going to take you to the police station and wait around until you decide to show us some ID.
Well, you're always within your rights to ask, am I under arrest? Am I under arrest? And if you're not under arrest, you're perfectly entitled to walk away. Now, I realize everything I'm saying can be really difficult to actually execute.
Yeah, this is Chicago. I mean, come on, really. Good luck.
Yeah. You're dealing with a law enforcement agent who is armed and who can be behaving in a very intimidating way. But I think it's going to be our job over the next weeks, months, years to try to empower people to assert their rights. And the first step in being able to assert your rights is knowing what your rights are. And so we're going to be doing lots and lots of training in that regard for our communities.
I want to talk about that with you in just a moment. And also, we've all been reading these horror stories now about people training their families of what to do if something should happen. And I want to ask you about that in just a moment. Can you hang around?
Sure.
Great.
I can, sure.
More about how families are going to be equipped. And you may think you don't know anybody who's in this position. You would probably be surprised at the people you know and the families you know where things are not quite necessarily as they appear to be. And we'll learn more about that from Fred Tsao, who is the director, I want to make sure I get his title right, Senior Policy Counsel at the Illinois Coalition for Immigrant and Refugee Rights on WCPT.
You're listening to WCPT 820 because facts matter.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive. Filling in today for Joan, radio personality and author Turi Ryder.
3:53, the Joan Esposito Show, where Eric Zorn will be behind the microphone tomorrow. If you really, 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 really miss Joan, you can catch her new podcast availability, Joan Esposito Live, Local, and Progressive. It has its own podcast. You can get the full episodes or featured interviews. If there's something that any of us who've been filling in, keeping the chair warm for Joan have done that you want to hear again or share with somebody, those are also archived as Joan Esposito podcasts and interviews. Still with me, Fred Tsao. He is, am I pronouncing your name correctly? I just need to check on that.
You got it, Terry.
Okay. He is a senior policy counsel at the Illinois Coalition for Immigrant and Refugee Rights. And I was going to ask you about the training you've been doing, but I heard from our very own engineer, Lady B, an experience of standing on your rights does not always give you the requested and required result. So she agreed that she would speak about this. Lady B, go ahead.
It was like maybe 5-6 years ago, I got pulled over. I had my driver's license, I had my insurance, but they stopped me because they said my driver's license is suspended in 2002, and it was 2017 at that time. So I don't know. They still arrested me. I was kept overnight, and they told me that I had to plead guilty and they'll let me go on a misdemeanor.
And your license was current, right?
It was current.
And do you think this has anything connected to race, ethnic background, any reason why you think they might have picked on you? There's no reason.
No reason.
Okay.
I just...
Because here in Chicago, we definitely worry about driving while being darker skinned than other people. This was in Chicago?
Yes, by Humboldt Park.
By Humboldt Park. So that's a neighborhood that's very heavily policed.
Yes.
So what do you think when you hear a story like that?
Well, I would say that we have a lot of work to do with respect to police policies, police enforcement, and underlying concerns regarding race, particularly in the city and particularly in this country. So, I don't know the specifics of your situation, Lady B, but I'm very sorry this happened, and you'd think that a suspended license from 15 years prior wouldn't matter, but I don't know what more to say.
I'm sure you've seen, but I guess the reason I wanted this story told is I'm sure you hear these stories, and yet you are advising people, you have these rights, stand on your rights. what happens after you've given up some of these rights and you were pressured into doing so, like by spending a night in jail, for example?
Yeah, well, first, one of the things that we emphasize in our Know Your Rights presentations is, have the name of a lawyer or have the name of family members who you can call, to seek help to, get yourself out of jail, or in the case of an immigration arrest, get yourself out of immigration detention.
And do you recommend? Okay, so now we're moving into the training that you're doing and what you're advising people. They should have what on their person, the name of an attorney. They should have. What should they be equipped with, especially if they're here undocumented? What should they have?
Yeah. They should definitely commit to memory names and phone numbers of key people, whether it's relatives, spouses, parents, children, attorneys, pastors, anybody who they can trust to, and who they can readily contact. Keep in mind that if you are in lockup, whether it's at a police station or at an ICE holding facility, you're probably not going to have your cell phone on you, and so if you're like me, you may have trouble remembering, key phone numbers and key names. But at least I know by heart, the phone numbers of certain people who I know I can call.
That's so important. I don't even know my kids' phone numbers anymore because in my phone, it's embarrassing. I'm sorry to admit it, but it's true. So how many calls? We've all seen TV. You get your one phone call. What kind of phone call do you get if you're held in one of these facilities?
Again, you are entitled to a phone call at least, and in many circumstances, say you're at a jail being held for ICE purposes, there should be some kind of phone system or electronic communication system on which you can make a call.
Do you only get one? Is it really true? You get one phone call and then it's all over? Like if the person isn't home, you're doomed?
I think it varies from place to place, if I'm not mistaken. So, again, in many of these facilities, first back when we had ICE contracts with county jails, those county jails would have a system through which people could make phone calls or video calls, and be in contact with relatives or with attorneys or such.
And will an attorney come through regularly and speak to people who haven't been able to speak to anybody? We just have 30 seconds, but...
Yeah. Again, it is going to depend on the circumstances. I can't speak for every single attorney out there, but I think most of them try to be as responsive as they can.
And if you need more information, does the Illinois Coalition for Immigrant and Refugee Rights maintain a page where people can look for more?
We do. There's our regular website, ici.org.
Okay, we got to hold it there. So I'm going to send people there. ICIRR. Oh, gosh. One more time. I've blown it.
No, you got it. ICIRR.org.
Okay. Do it. Make a note of that. Get yourself informed. Thank you, Fred Sau. I appreciate the information. It's 4:00 WCPT.
The Thom Hartmann radio program provides all of the intelligence, information, and insight you'll need to win the water cooler wars. Weekdays 11 to 2 right here on WCPT 820, Chicago's Progressive Talk, where facts matter. Alexa, play WCPT.
WCPT from TuneIn.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive. Filling in today for Joan, radio personality and author, Turi Ryder.
Just about 4:05, beginning of 2025. We've had some serious conversations following on to the conversation that we just had with Fred Sau of the Illinois Coalition for Immigrant and Refugee Rights. I was talking with Lady B about how you just do not forget any encounter with a legal entity where you are not treated respectfully and fairly. You do not forget it. especially if it ends up with a night in jail. That one, that is seared into you forever. And it's very hard. I mean, look, I am so grateful to Chicago police. They do more, risk more, offer more than any human being should be asked to risk or offer. And yet there are always, and they will admit this in their quiet moments, there are always those bad news guys, women sometimes. And it's very hard to winnow those out. And those are the stories. It's just like with the news. You don't hear, well, and in the news today was a great day. Nothing really horrible happened. That does not happen. And even if you do, there was a point in my life where I did news and traffic. And the one thing we were taught never to say, never say no problems on that road, because the minute you say no problem on that road, somebody will run out of gas in the middle lane. That will, at the very least, will happen. So, we don't hear about the good things that the police do in general. And I don't want to imply that it's all bad news. But the experience that you have with ICE, with any kind of immigration authority, with any kind of legal entity, it's going to stick with you if it's not a respectful interaction. And it builds and it builds and it builds. And it's really hard to undo that kind of thing. Anyone who works in customer service knows this. You can destroy a reputation with one horrible interaction. Just one. You go to a restaurant. You've loved it. They serve you one horrible meal. You do not go back. We're just wired that way, I guess. We retain. Promised you I was going to introduce you to this information. If you're one of those people, and I have to put a caveat on this. If you're a person with a fake Christmas tree, this will not help you. Artificial Christmas tree, nothing's going to eat your Christmas tree. But live Christmas trees, there's an option. We're going to meet in a little bit. An entity that can actually dine upon your Christmas tree. Yeah, we are in a minute. And also coming up, a little bit of art in the new year. And better than art in the new year would be art where there was once violence and tragedy. So that's all coming up this hour. I am Turi with you, Ryder, in for the wonderful Joan Esposito, who will be returning. I should also let you know what is coming up for you later this evening. Patty Vasquez is back in person. Her guests include film critic Mike Crawley, and she will have a gift certificate for Fry the Coop to give away. Also, tomorrow in this very chair, at this very micro, I think, does he come? Is he in this chair? Maybe he's in a different chair. Eric Zorn, wonderful writer, also media personality, writes the Picayune. Is it the Picayune Times, the Picayune Chronicle, the Picayune something or other? And I like to read it. He does a great job of picking out stories and putting them out there for the public. He also keeps really great tabs on Chicago's mayor, with whom I have, as you probably know, a rather unfortunate view. A very unfortunate view. But I get some of my evidence straight out of Eric Zorn, although he's nicer about it than I am. So you should check out his online publication, and he will be here tomorrow. If you can't get enough of Joan Esposito, you can catch her full episodes or featured interviews in their podcast form. Simply Google Joan Esposito podcast, and that will come right up. I want to look over some of the texts that you've sent in, and thank you for sending them. And if you've been wanting to communicate and for some reason I've been visiting with my guests and haven't gotten to your thoughts, this is a really good time to get them in. 773-763-WCPT. This would be available both as phone call and as text. Oh, thank you so much for all these texts just thanking me for being a live person today. Certainly better than if I were here and not alive. That would be the advantage. You don't want me just sitting there at, what is that movie? Is it Weekend at Bernie's? with the guy who's just they prop him up all over the place.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. You don't want Weekend at Turi's. That would not be good. No, I'm really here. And if you can't get enough of me, by the way, the podcast that I do, you can just stick my name in your browser and ask for podcast, and that will come right up. And we usually do 2 of them per week, and they're never longer than 15 minutes. So that will not take up too much of your day. I've been looking with great interest, and I don't know if you're a reader of Crane's Chicago Business. I totally love Crane's Chicago Business because they are a business publication that is not run by right-wing crazy people. Unlike some other business publications I could name that are run by, at the very least, their editorial page run by right-wing crazy people. And by the way, the one I'm thinking of, even they couldn't stomach Donald Trump. Even that publication couldn't manage an endorsement of Donald Trump. But I thought it was really kind of fascinating that they did a whole big expose on marijuana live grow operations in our neighboring state, in Michigan. I don't know if you've had the opportunity to drive through Michigan lately, but I would say, and again, this is just my completely non-scientific take on it, I think about 75% of the billboards in Michigan are probably pot relevant. And they all have very clever names. And I'd like to point out that a lot of them are going under. They're financially unsustainable. And here in Chicago, and in where we all thought that people who got these licenses were just going to be rolling in the loot, that's not happening so much either. As we roll into the new year, people are discovering, people who've invested a lot of money, that having a legal dispensary is not just an opportunity to print money. It's kind of... I cannot claim that I had any insight here. I am neither a consumer nor purveyor of anything pot related, although God knows a lot of my friends will put out a full spread of everything from gummies to things you can roll and smoke. But I just sort of assumed that it would be cheaper, but that people would buy more of it. And apparently the ways that some of our Illinois growers are managing to be successful is just in the same way that any other business manages to be more successful. They've integrated their whole operation from growing to selling their own brand of product. And it's just kind of fascinating to watch as the industry shifts. And interestingly enough, they also have to face competition from people who are still selling off-market, grow-it-yourself, illegal, however you want to describe it, product. And now, of course, in Illinois, we have a whole legal difficulty with hemp-related products. I bought my first hemp-related product. I did. I bought my first, it's a hair oil. I did. And I'm like, look at me. I'm supporting the pot industry. Look at me. I'm buying I was so excited. As Susie, the original Susie Cleanlung, the original designated driver, I was like, look, I'm so cool now. I'm supporting the hemp industry. And I was very excited about it until I realized that I think it maybe has like 10% hemp. I have no idea why they even call it that, except that it smells suspiciously like a college dorm room circa 1976. So let's go to Ron in Chicago, who wants to talk about a subject we were discussing earlier in the program, the New Orleans horrific slaughter of the celebrants of New Year's. Ron, welcome. You're on WCPT. Hi.
Yes. Hi. Yes. If the terrorist
did not use a pickup truck to murder 16 people. Let's say instead he used a assault weapon, then the Republicans will be saying to me that, well, he was just mentally ill. Let's move on.
Oh, yeah, that's a good point. That's a good point. And I assume that you are well familiar with the fact that the president-elect diagnosed this gentleman as, I shouldn't say gentleman, I forget I said gentleman, diagnosed this man as a, quote, illegal alien, even though he's an American-born veteran. So all of the language that's around this, you're quite right to point it out. The language makes a difference.
Right.
And it may turn out, I mean, I would describe any kind of zealotry as a not necessarily diagnosable mental illness, but I think zealotry in all of its forms is not healthy. It's a mental disorder, I would say. And I don't care which side of the spectrum that comes on. And that includes people who are paranoid about deep states. And that's a form of paranoia. But because it's on the right, nobody's saying, this obsession with the deep state, this is not balanced. This is not a balanced view of the world. So what do you think is going to happen next, Ron?
With the terrorists, or
no, with the whole conversation around this guy in New Orleans and the attempt to connect it to Las Vegas, which the news organizations are now, in my opinion, really grasping at straws trying to do. And I may be wrong. We just don't have enough data, and we are incapable in this industry of just shutting up and waiting. We can't do that, because what if somebody else guesses right?
Yeah, well, they're going to try their best to have some kind of connection.
Yes, they're trying now. Thank you for calling. I appreciate your time and your view. It's true. I think Ron's absolutely right that if the guy had used an assault weapon, we would be told that it's he was ill. We need to improve our mental health facilities. And what's true is that he may very well have been mentally ill. He may very well have been a veteran with PTSD. He may have had all kinds of things wrong with him, but we're not going to hear about that from our incoming elected. I promised you a little a moment of who or what would eat your Christmas tree. And I want to make sure, is it pronounced Mykele or Michael? Mykele. Okay, I want to get that right. Mykele Deville. What a gorgeous name. Welcome to WCPT.
Having me.
Hi. Tell me what you do and where you're setting people's Christmas trees, please.
Absolutely. I'm the program coordinator and farm ambassador for Urban Growers Collective. We're an urban farm that is Black and woman-led. It's a nonprofit on the south side of Chicago, in the South Chicago neighborhood. We have about 8 farms throughout the city. The largest farm is in South Chicago on 9001 South Mackinac, and it's an 8-acre farm, and this is where we actually have our goats. We have about 9 goats.
Wait, hold up there, because people are going, goats. How did goats come into this? Because I am going to say that the thing that brought you here today is the idea that goats could eat your Christmas tree. That just floored me. How did you even discover that a goat would eat a Christmas tree?
Well, we have goats here as a relationship builder with folk. We just want people to understand that, when you work on a farm, it goes kind of hand in hand with raising livestock. So goats help to compost a lot of our vegetable weeds when we have volunteers come down and weed. They just kind of fill it up in wheelbarrows and the goats eat it. It's good for their digestive tract. And we realized through our animal husbandry program that they love Christmas trees. The pine needles offer vitamins. Vitamin A and C is great for their skin and hair. And the Christmas trees kind of help the goats just keep their digestive tract clear of parasites.
No kidding. All right. Well, so many questions I have for you, Mykele. First of all, I'm going to guess here that the ornaments, the lights, and the tinsel and anything you sprayed on it can't be there. That's kind of a no-brainer. Yeah, no, you do not want, despite all the cartoons we've seen of goats eating everything, do not feed the goat your old plastic Santa Claus ornament. It's not good. But, okay, you've got a clean Christmas tree. Is there a particular kind of Christmas tree that the goats prefer?
No, it's any just live Christmas tree, like you said. No tinsel, no ornaments, anything sprayed on it. Not sprayed for like fire retardant or anything like that. They generally love trees that kind of come from tree farmers, if anything. So if you went out and got to chop down a tree and you want to kind of bring it down, if it didn't keep well, or even if it did, they'll snack and munch on those. But they're not too picky. Oh,
good to know. These goats are not fussy eaters. How many Christmas trees? You just mentioned, I think you said 8 goats for your farm. Is that right? A flock of 8?
9.
9. Okay. What kind of goats are these? She asks, wondering what kind of goats are these. Yes.
They're mainly Nigerian pygmy goats. We have about 9 of them, and we have a couple of bigger goats as well, but we mainly have the Nigerian pygmy goats.
I have only the slightest inkling about this, but my podcast partner who lives on a mountain in Arizona has pet goats, so I can now report to her what kind of goats these are. And how many Christmas trees does your average goat, pygmy Nigerian goat, consume for dinner, say?
They can strip a whole tree within a day. So, wow. I'd say about 2 trees a day. And the numbers have been flocking in, so they are eating.
Wow. And do they get fat on these trees? And can you overfeed your goat with Christmas trees?
Yeah, goats actually, they bloat up a little bit. So the goats, they do, just like us, after you eat a good Christmas meal, they kind of bloat up. But again, the pine needles kind of help that digestive tract to move things along.
Okay, so they swell up, but then it all comes out.
Yes, it all comes out.
Yes. Okay, so you don't have to worry about limiting your Christmas tree intake if you are a goat watching your health and figure. You can have all the tree you want. It's a buffet out there.
Absolutely. And everything else kind of, on the farm works as fertilizer and compost that helps us kind of grow things. So it's a closed circle you're helping to contribute to.
This is lovely. So do you ever come to a point where you go, okay, that's it. That's all they can eat. Please stop bringing us your Christmas trees. We would need more goats. We can't handle more goats. That's it. Or is it open to all for as long as they have their trees?
It's open until about January 11th. You can bring down as many as you want, because even if the goats don't eat them, the bark themselves, the bark, they use them as scratching posts. And we have a robust composting program here as well. So we can compost it ourselves as well if the goats are just too full up. So we're taking everything that you have all the way up until January 11th.
Wow. And is this a substitute for any of the other foods that goats customarily eat, or is this in addition to their regular goat nutritious diet?
This is a wonderful, hearty snack for them. It's in addition to. So they eat the vegetable weeds that we have here, and they eat straw and hay. And so this is the part of the year where they get something just to kind of switch it up a little bit, and something fun for them as well that they enjoy.
Oh, so this is like the Christmas cookie for the goat, then? The kind of thing that you don't make this every day because it's just too much of a pain in the, just pardon the expression, tail, because goats have tails. Yeah. So instead of making the almond crescent cookies that take forever, or those big fancy gingerbread cookies, for a goat, it's a Christmas tree.
Absolutely.
How did you discover? Was this like a conference you went to, or did somebody just accidentally pitch a Christmas tree in there, or did the goats get out one day and eat the Christmas tree in the front of your farm, or how did you find out that the goats would eat your Christmas tree?
Well, we had the goats here for a couple of years, and we had some very dedicated employees want to kind of take initiative and take care of the goats. But we all wanted to learn a little bit more about the goats because they've become our pseudo mascot. So we started an animal husbandry goat program, sort of club here at the farm, and they work with some professionals with goats to figure out how we can keep them happy and keep them healthy. And they let us know this information that they can eat, pine trees, and it's actually good for them. It freshens their breath. They love it. And we just figured at the end of the year, people have all these live trees but don't really know how to recycle and reduce their holiday waste, and we're all about reducing that waste. So we put 2 and 2 together, and it actually was a hit.
Wow. And I have to say, I'm having trouble mentally moving off the it freshens their breath. I'm trying to imagine what their breath normally smells like and who has the job of smelling the goat's breath to see if it's pleasantly evergreen, foresty, fresh, or if it's, what would it smell like otherwise? Rotten vegetables, or what is goat breath? I realize I'm kind of putting you on the spot here, but what does your typical goat's breath smell like?
Personally, I wouldn't know because I don't necessarily handle the goats. We have a couple of experts here in that club. But when I've been down to help out with the volunteering, it smells like old vegetables, I'd say. And they do a lot of kind of spitting as well like that. So they can use some, like, freshening for their breath.
I would imagine, although, again, I would imagine that there are many other aspects of the goat that smell far worse than their breath. I could be wrong about that, but I'm just, I haven't asked my podcast partner what is the smelliest thing about her goat, but I will tell you that the small goat learned to sneak in through the dog door to the point where the dog doesn't get to use the dog door. Yeah, very sneaky goat. They're pretty clever if you're not paying attention. Yeah.
They're incredibly intelligent. They know how to wander around if they want to.
And do they beg for Christmas trees? Like a dog will go over and wait for its snack by the snack jar. Do they know where the Christmas trees are coming from? Are they right there waiting? Or do you just have to flag them down and go, hey, tree over here?
Oh, no. When they see someone coming with a giant Christmas tree, they all rush the gate and stand in front of the gate, and you kind of tip it over. So it's really fun for families to come and actually feed the goats. You flip the Christmas tree over the gate, and they're there in droves, all 9 of them, and they're just kind of starting to pick it apart.
They get to do it?
We have like a pile around them.
Family gets to do it? Tidings of comfort and joy. That's fabulous. Okay, where are you located if families want to come with their tree? Because I would imagine, I'm Jewish, I don't have a Christmas tree, but I almost want to get one just so I can have this experience. Or maybe someone will invite me to come along with their family. What is that like where do they go? Where do they pull up with their tree? Please tell me more.
Absolutely. So they can come to 9001 South Mackinac. That's MACK, INAW Avenue. And the entrance is on 90th Street. We're a huge farm. You'll be able to see it right as you pull up. You can either leave the tree right up front if you don't want to come in and feed. I don't know why you wouldn't, but you can leave it up front, and we will take you back. Or I'll be in the front myself to meet people anytime between 8:30 a.m. to 5 p.m. And then I'll walk you back to the goat pen, and we'll tip the tree over for you to feed the goats.
Is that weekends too?
Yeah, every day until January 11th.
Because the goats have to eat every day. This is, I can imagine right about now, it's a winter break. A lot of kids are not back in school. The parents have worked that elf on the shelf thing about as hard as they can. The gifts are open. Everybody's done all of that. Some of the toys are losing a little of their luster. And what do you do with the kids? And you have just provided, like you can start building the drama now. Like, kids, we're going to go to see the farm, and we're going to watch the goats eat the tree. And you can really, if I were a parent with kids home from school and I had a Christmas tree, I'd begin now building their expectations so that they can have that experience. What are the kids, what is it like for the kids when the tree goes over the fence for the goats to eat?
Oh, it's so beautiful. This morning we had a family, a father and a small girl. She couldn't have been more than maybe 5 or 6. And they loaded the giant Christmas tree off of the truck. They got to walk through the farm, and right now farm is like in winterization mode, so it's a perfect opportunity to see it bare, and then we invite them to come back during, April and things when everything's in bloom. But they get to walk the farm, and when she saw the goats and they ran out, her face lit up with joy. It's one of the best things to see when you can see live animals within the city of Chicago.
I love this. Okay, well, I'm going to find somebody with a Christmas tree and go there with them because I have to tell you, there's not a goat in this planet that's going to eat my Hanukkah menorah. That's not happening. And I will have to branch out and do some, bridge building. I have plenty of friends with Christmas trees. There are actually several Christians who tolerate me, believe it or not. And I'll get there. I will get there. Mykele, thank you so much for all that you do. And I'm going to recommend that people look up the Urban Growers Collective. And that is the entry place, I guess, for a whole web universe full of information about your project, right?
Absolutely. You look us up, urbangrowerscollective.org, and you can learn all about the farm and volunteer opportunities.
Okay, and if you get there with your tree before I have a chance to flag somebody down and go there with their tree, do me a favor, let me know how you liked it, because I'm guessing you're going to love it. Mykele, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much. Have a great, great night.
You too. It's 4:30. I'm Turi Ryder. In a moment, we're going to talk about making art and beauty where once there was something much worse. And the Pink House, Chicago's legendary Pink House. If you don't know about it, you'll hear a little about that too. 4:30, it is Joan Esposito Show. I am Turi Ryder. That's Turi with a U. Ryder, yes, that is my book. That is my podcast. You can find me on the socials. Go ahead, be my friend. It only hurts for a little while. A little while. 4:31.
You know that you can listen to Chicago's Progressive Talk on WCPT AM 820. Stream us live at WCPT820.com and on the TuneIn Radio app. Or you can ask Alexa, Siri, or Google to play WCPT from TuneIn. But now you have another option. We're simulcasting our programming overnights, 8 p.m. to 6 a.m. on WSBC AM 1240 for a clearer reception in and around the city. Chicago's Progressive Talk, WCPT 820. And now overnights on WSBC 1240 AM, where facts matter.
This is Chicago's Progressive Talk, 820 AM, WCPT Willow Springs, and online at WCPT820.com, where facts matter.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive. Filling in today for Joan, radio personality and author Turi Ryder.
4:33 as you make your way perhaps home, or maybe you get that long New Year's holiday weekend. Either way, you'll want to be near a radio. Starting around 5 o'clock, Patty Vasquez will be here, and her guests include film critic Mike Crowley. She also has a $25 gift card for Fry's. Let me try that again. Fry the Coop to give away. So she will feed your soul, your brain, your stomach, perhaps, all coming up after 5 o'clock when she drives you home. Speaking of driving, this was a neighborhood that was known for drive-bys. This green space was hardly a green space when it was taken over by an artistic collective. I guess that would be a good way to describe it. I'm hoping so. The project is called Territory Creating Space. It's an art installation in Chicago's Austin neighborhood. Dr. David Stewart, welcome. You're on WCPT. Tell me about this project, what there was, what's now, what are some of the challenges right now?
Sure. Well, first off, thank you for having me. As you mentioned, it was across the street from the infamous Pink House, which was, known on the west side. It was a space that you would often know where you are. You would ground yourself in. And across the street, where we did a territory, was began working on an art installation, if you will, more from an urban design perspective, that our kids were like, hey, we want to put something here. And a lot of people, for those who are listening that don't know, like the Pink House was literally a pink house.
Yes, and inside too, not just outside, but inside. The Pink House was a Victorian mansion. It's still standing. It's just not pink anymore. I don't want to make anybody really flip out and worry, but it was falling into disrepair, and it was pink outside, pink inside. The wood, I believe, was pink. The furnishings were pink. It was a family that truly, it was, I always found it a little unnerving reading, I felt a little bit like I was locked in a jar of Pepto-Bismol when I would look at details of it, but it meant something to the community there, and it actually sort of proves the point that if you have something that's significant and meaningful to a community, good things happen around it, inspires more for the community. Is that just me being optimistic or no?
No, it's been proven. So Territory is an urban design focused firm that's driven by youth. And what we do is we use art to kind of tell the story that you just elaborated on. So it was driven by our youth that wanted to kind of give an ode to it. So we'd worked on some designs, and then this summer we placed site furniture and actually like a mini replica, kind of an ode to it on that site. As you had mentioned, that site had previously dealt with a lot. There was a previous house on the site that was removed in '88, and nothing had been on the site. And personally, I'm a firm believer that crime and community cannot exist in the same place. So if you put community there, you can move the crime. And, we had our installation there, and it's been there since, and it's a testament to what you spoke of.
So talk about what has gone into that site. And also, you said 16 to 26 is the age of the people who are designing this. What were there? Is that right? 16 is the
14
beginning?
to 24.
14 to 24-year-olds. And are these, who are these young people? Are they aspiring architects, gardeners, artists? What's there now? What did they put there? This ode to the Pink House. What does it look like if you could describe it visually for us?
Sure. So to answer the first question, these are youth of Austin. We have some that are interested in architecture. We have some that want to be attorneys and things like that, but they are youth of the community. And they wanted to put something there that was positive. So for those listeners, we have site furniture there. So they built and designed these crates. There's a table there. There's a couple of tables there. And then there's like a mini porch right there where you can kind of sit and sit down just, while you're waiting for the bus, gather, take a seat. Like it's something for public gathering, which is something you don't normally see in Austin, right? And it was built and designed by these kids, and it was all their ideas. All we did was give them literally the tools and help them and coach them into doing it. So youth of Austin is often Austin youth are associated with negative stereotypes. Well, here's a positive one that we're getting out there, and we're changing that narrative one project at a time.
How did you find these folks, and how did they find you?
Territory's been around since 2015, so it's a 10-year anniversary. We have kids that come from local high schools, so from Spear, from Prosser, they can sign up. You can go to the website, territorychicago.org. You can fill out the information, and a lot of it, believe it or not, have been repeat students who come back, and then they share it with their friends like, hey, this is cool. I want you to join in on this with me.
Oh, you anticipated my next question, which is, do they continue to be involved once the structures are built? Well, how do they continue to be involved? They go on to the next project, or they maintain that project, or what?
Well, the great question. It's a mixture of both. So we're working on some other projects. We're working on an evolution to that design on that site. And we have that age range. So briefly, 14 to 15 is our intro studio. 16 to 17 is our advanced studio. And then 18 above is our intern for design equity. So we all collaborate on a project. So the intro studio may have one section, advanced may have another, and the interns for design equity will have another. And my job and a few others is to coordinate to make sure all the work comes together. So we do operate like a mini firm, getting the work together, getting the work done and executed.
Oh, very cool. Do you have a bricks and mortar location where these studios and these meetings and conferences and brainstorms happen? And is that in Austin? Where if you have one, is that?
Sure. So our current headquarters is roughly north in Lockwood, so 5256 West North Avenue. So we are of and in the community. Mm-hmm. So that's where the magic happens. This past fall semester, we were working on a future project, also in Austin. I can't give that one away yet, but the goal is to help what we call the design desert. So just for your edification, there is not a design firm in the Austin community but us. no
Wow.
architecture firm or nothing.
Wow.
So we're trying to show through design, through use of the community, that, instead of associating youth with negative things, well, here are youth doing positive things, and we're looking and expecting more people to get behind it, because this is the built proof that if you give kids opportunities, they do care.
I'm guessing that you also have some bridges built between your program and IIT, which is consistently looking for kids to do this kind of, or one of the community colleges, I forget which one, that has a big engineering program where they're really looking to get kids ready and send them on to U of I's design, architecture, engineering programs. Do you have bridges with some of these other programs to move the kids into more professional arenas, or does the work inspire them and then they go on themselves? How does that work?
So we have a mixture of both. We do have relationships with the architecture programs in the city of Chicago, as well as a real estate program. But we're also looking to create other bridges for those who may not be interested in it, because the built environment needs lawyers, it needs architects, it needs other people as well, it needs gardeners. So the thing is, community isn't just, one thing. But we've developed the relationships for the kids who are interested. That, we recently had a kid last year who worked on our program. He's currently a first-year architecture student at Notre Dame.
Oh, wow.
School of Architecture.
Very cool.
We're building the pipelines, and more so just presenting the opportunity. As a native of Chicago myself, born and raised, high school, I wish I had a program like this when I was their age. So often it's just presenting the pipeline so they can, take it if they want. But even if they don't want to do it, we still try to help them get in college and find what it is they truly want to do with their life.
Or the trades. We had the Chicago Women in Trades on here a few months back, and they were just marvelous about talking about getting women in these good paying and good paying and productive and exciting trades. I was really interested. I don't know if you've heard her story, but the woman who spoke with us, who runs Chicago Women in the Trades, I asked her how she came to be doing it. And she said she had trained as a social worker, and then she did a Habitat for Humanity project. And as a result, she discovered she liked building things better. And so she got active with women in the trades. And she said whenever she sees a woman in what she considers to be a fairly low paid, cashier or something where you don't make a lot of money, she slips her a card. But as you correctly point out, if people can see these kinds of opportunities, you're building the thing that you wish had been there for you. And do they come back afterwards? And what do they say? Because you mentioned you've been doing this a while.
Yeah, well, we have students that come back to check in, as they get older. Some of them come back, even as adults to, hey, can we work on X, Y, and Z? But the biggest testament is we've had students that literally have gone on and like, hey, I have a friend who's interested in building. Can he join? Can she join? And incidentally, our building program right now, I would probably say is 3-to-1 women to men. So,
oh, that's nice.
We're interested in, if you're interested in doing it, we will make it work. And often it's learning the skills that are transferable, leadership skills, management skills, things that, wow, it's more than just hitting a nail with a hammer and some wood. It's how did you learn how to do this, and understanding design, understanding building, and just understanding the built environment around you. It's so much to it that no one has shown a lot of these youth that it's an actual opportunity to it, but it also impacts where you lay your head and what you do.
Well, it's true. And when you design for the people who live in the community, sometimes the design looks a little bit different than if you're designing for people who come in from outside the community, assessing the needs. I mean, as you pointed out, there was this neighborhood magnet, the Pink House, that people wanted to continue appreciating and honoring. If you just sort of swooped in and looked at this lot without any awareness of the Pink House, it would look a lot different than it looks now, I'm guessing. And it was, I don't know if you caught this, it was just a few months ago. I think it was a Mahar house. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it correctly. And I think it was in the Austin neighborhood. That went on the market, a gorgeous, gorgeous home that had, was in need of some assistance. But it was very sad to read comments in the national feedback columns about what people said about some of these neighborhoods that are a little bit tougher in Chicago to come up in. And I look forward to hearing the positive feedback about these projects that you're putting together, which is why I'm about to ask you if you had a magic wand and could give your group anything else that you wanted. What are some of the things that you would like to see or have for Territory?
A bigger headquarters for us where we could house our own wood shop, a bigger space to design, and a bigger safe space. And more people who are open to design. I mean, you bring up a good point about the neighborhood. You know, when people mention, for instance, Austin being a bad neighborhood, a lot of people don't know there's a Frank Lloyd Wright house in Austin.
Yes, well, and this George Mahar house, I think, was also in Austin. And I took one look at this real estate listing. It just knocked me over. And then what people do is they go to those stupid little crime maps, you know, with all the little dots on them. This happened, that happened. I got friends from the suburb who won't come visit me because I live in Uptown, and they look at the little crime, this dot and that dot and the other dot. And you're like, oh, come on. I don't walk down the street and worry about the dots. It just doesn't, you know, that's not how you live your life. So a bigger space. I want to talk to you a little bit about your funding, where it comes from. If you can just hang on with me, we'll talk a little more about that and the projects upcoming, and maybe a little more about the Pink House. Dr. David Stewart is with us. He's the program director at Territory, Creating Space, and is their latest installation in Austin, an homage to the Pink House. We'll hear more about that in just a second on WCPT.
Chicago's Progressive Talk, WCPT 820, where facts matter.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive. Filling in today for Joan, radio personality and author Turi Ryder.
Oh, sweet. 4:49 minutes away from Patty Vasquez, who will drive you home. Tomorrow, Eric Zorn takes this spot, and Joan returns on Monday. Before we get right back to Dr. Stewart, I just want to read this text that came in. Someone who self-identifies as a 25-year retired police sergeant wanted to clarify in regards to the conversation we had about whether you're required to identify yourself to the police. If you are someone who has a police interest in that a crime has been committed or is about to occur, you do have to identify yourself. Okay, but that doesn't necessarily come with your nationality, I'm assuming, and I thank you for that insight from the text line. Now, Dr. Stewart, thank you for being with us again from Territory. And talking about your install across in the Pink House. I want to ask you about what the folks working on the project did to educate themselves about the history of the Pink House, or did they strictly approach it from what was presented to the public, you know, as you would walk by it day to day? Did they learn anything about, because the Pink House has some interesting history. It's now a greenhouse, but it's been restored, I understand. So what was that education process like for them is my first question. And my second question is, what have the neighbors had to say about it? And you take those in any order you please.
So I'm going to go in the order you gave. Okay. In terms of learning, the students researched, looked up, used the internet. I'm without giving away my age, I remember, other ways of research.
Oh, the library? You go to the library too, do you? Join the club, yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes, indeed. Yes.
But also we collaborated with the previous owner and the current owner. So the current owner didn't know the history. They bought a house and, hey, I'm buying a house. So we've been blessed to be able to collaborate and gather insights from the previous and current owner. And then the neighborhood, the neighborhood has been all for it. We've gotten political support. We've gotten a lot of support just from the locals. And even from the element that most people don't think we would get support, I mean, they support it too because they see that. As I tell people, all people who've had different lifestyles aren't bad people, right?
No, that's true.
While and believe it or not, they are part of the upkeep because they see that, hey, these youth are coming in and giving them something positive. And I think at the core, the neighborhood of Austin appreciates it because they know it's not a malicious developer coming in trying to kick the people out. It's people who care about the community who are trying to show them through art that there is value to not only that site, but Austin as a whole.
I don't know why I didn't think to ask you this earlier. You mentioned a house had been there. Do you actually own this piece of land now? Does it belong to you, or how is that structured?
Sure. So we're in collaboration with a few others. Again, some of this I can't give away just yet because we're working on some other stuff. But we have assistance with certain endeavors with that lot that allow us to do that. And more importantly, what has been interesting is I think our project is sparking a different conversation to activate lots in a creative way. Because there's over 1,300 1,100 empty lots in Austin. So just consider for a moment how cool it would be just in this neighborhood, which is actually the largest neighborhood in geography in Chicago, to have more art like this to change the narrative, to increase the value, and to make it more neighborly. So when we think of neighborhoods in Chicago positively, we think of the Hyde Park, the Lincoln Parks. But when we think traditionally negatively, we think of the Austins and the Lawndales. Well, what would happen if we had more sites like this activated to give people something positive to talk about?
Well, absolutely. We were just talking to a gentleman, I don't know if you heard, from the Urban Farm Collective. I want to make sure I get his name right. Urban Growers Collective. And they have some concerns there in Austin, up and going. And then I know there are beekeepers there, and people are just making these organic efforts to create, I don't know if it sounds too Pollyannish, but it's like magic in these communities. I know that I have visited when there's the Chicago Architecture Open House, North Lawndale, and communities where I wouldn't normally have a reason to go. And also if my kid goes, what is the magnet school, the selective enrollment school that's in your area? I can't think of the name of it. There is one. And I took my kid there for some event. And I mean, little things that bring the people of the neighborhood together and also bring respect from other parts of the city are important. Are you doing any outreach to explain to other parts of the city what's going on in Austin?
Well, we are. We're Austin-based, Austin-focused, but this conversation can be extrapolated anywhere in the city. I think part of our focus as territory is through design, showing people that community is the same anywhere. Like, everybody wants the same thing. We want good grocery stores. We want places where kids can play. We want art, right? So people tend to think that, well, they didn't associate Austin with such things, but now the narrative is changing. And as a designer, myself trained as a designer, I remind people that people want the same things across the city.
They do. They really do.
So
and I loved what
changing that narrative is important.
I loved what you said about some of the folks that people might have looked askance at are now big supporters of the project. And I just share with you like a little personal narrative. I've got a college graduate who went to school in New York City, in a school that was adjacent to a neighborhood that's considered to be a little bit more challenging. And he during COVID, he got sick of living with us. And he said, well, would we send him back to New York on our nickel? And I said, the heck we would. And so he said, well, fine. He would work and he would rent a room. Well, where can you rent a room in New York City that you can afford on your college student salary? And he ended up on, if you looked at those little crime dots, apparently it was the most crime reported block in the entire Manhattan borough, where he ended up renting this room. And I didn't look, and he only found out later. I think a few things, like pieces of property disappeared. But out of the ground level of the building where he was living, there were a lot of businesses that are not legal operating. And I said, well, is that a problem for you at all, coming and going? He goes, no, they know we live here and they look out for us. Like, Okay. All right. And he was also an EMT on the ambulance that his school runs. And when the ambulance came to pick him up one day because the ambulance was still running. And when they saw that, they're like, oh, can you look at this? Can you look at that? Can you? And so you just never know what kind of relationships you'll forge just by going about your daily life. And nobody wants trouble with the people who live there. It's bad for business. So I guess what I'm saying is I'm not surprised to hear that the people in the neighborhood who may have been doing things in the space that Territory has claimed are delighted to have it there. Do they assist in any way with the upkeep and the support of the project?
They haven't that we are aware of, but the biggest thing that they've done is they've given respect to us because we give respect to them. We don't treat the neighbors, again, in an askance or rough neighborhood like, bad people. We speak to them, we're courteous, and I think any time you're building in a neighborhood like that, people are scared of the G word, gentrification. Oh, yeah. So when they see you showing up with wood and hammer and nails, are you pushing us away for a narrative? And they saw that, no, we're not. And, some of the things we're looking to add to the site is, like maybe a place to get like some soap or some feminine products or something like that. So how cool is that if you're in an unhoused situation where you can grab feminine products or grab soap or grab a book or something here in a place that's safe for you in your community? So they know that our heart is in a good place with them, and they give us that respect in return.
I love that. Not just your heart, but also your books and your feminine products. All useful, very useful items, and I'm sure very welcome. I'm delighted to have had the opportunity to speak with you today. Dr. Stewart, can you give the location where people who want to find out more can learn more about your project?
Sure. So, look up territorychicago.org. So that's Territory, TERRITORY, Chicago.org, one word. You can Google it, and that's the best way to get in contact with us. Drop us a line, let us know if you're interested. If you have a project in Austin that you want our youth to work on, let us know. We'll vet it out. And stick around because we got more to come in 2025 from Territory.
Well, I'm sure we'll be speaking to you again. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure having you on WCPT. It's just about a minute before 5 o'clock. Patty Vasquez will be in right after the news. It has been a pleasure. I hope we get to do it again soon. Joan will be back on Monday. Thank you, Lady B. Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Julia. Thank you, Mark. And thank you most of all for being with me today. And happy 2025.